just a second ago. Yeah.
I
going.
said that you said things that weren't true, and I
Bro,
explained why they were. Now you're just
Take your medicine, John.
No, let's not do that, please. John, this is the thing, bro. You did all that, and I only interjected to say, okay, dude, can you please actually address what I said? And you still didn't do it. So, according to your paradigm, when we go up and we look at a telescope, we have to tip the telescope, right? And the angles, the stars come in at an angle. So I'll just ask you, so you can say it for yourself. Why do stars come in at an angle on the Earth?
Do you want the Newtonian explanation or the relativistic explanation? They both work.
What's causing the stars to come in at an angle?
So in the relativistic explanation, it's that rain kind of analogy that you were talking about. The idea is that there's a rain of light coming down, and if we move through that rain, then the rain appears to come from a little further ahead, right? Like you have to tilt your umbrella forward.
It has nothing to do with relative. Whether or not what your interpretation of gravity is irrelevant. If the Earth is moving,
I wasn't talking about gravity.
You said Einstein Newtonian frameworks, neither one of those matter, because the point is that if the Earth is moving according to you guys,
man,
in fact,
guys drink fucking cream. They drink a stick of butter a day. I'm like,
you're hot micing, bro. Bear, please, Dick, you're hot micing, bro.
I don't think there's any good things.
Okay. This is the thing, right?
Is that Rocky?
Oh, hang on, I'll go.
I moved in. This is always invoked as an evidence that the Earth is moving, right? And your paradigm, and what I mean by that is the Earth moving, which is the whole thing we're talking about. Okay, they claim that the reason that for aberration and for everything that we see in the sky, basically, right, is that that we're moving through space. Okay, so they're claiming that just like the rain, like I told you, the rain's actually coming straight down, but because we're jogging through it, it's going to come at an angle to us. So they claim that the angle of light from the stars come to the Earth, that it comes from an angle, right? And that's because we're moving through space. Well, a telescope is sitting on the Earth, so it's moving through space with the Earth, according to that idea. So if the angle that the stars come in to the telescope are based on the Earth moving, if I then add water to the telescope, that's going to slow, quote unquote, slow down the light. Okay. But the telescope's going to keep moving at the same speed. So what that's going to do is going to increase the paraplegic, bro.
Oh, you fuck.
Like what in the world, man? The stars come in at an angle according to your paradigm because the Earth is moving. So if I add water to the telescope,
paradigm.
Oh, so
that's the straw man of my paradigm.
Wait. Aberration isn't because of Earth's orbit?
Right. It's not because, well, I shouldn't say it's not because of the orbit. I should say it's not because of it's not because Earth is moving. Because to say that something is moving is to suggest that you think there's such a thing as absolute velocity, and there isn't. The velocity of the Earth depends on...
You're interrupting me just to try to trick the audience again.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying you claimed it was my worldview. It's not, and I can explain that later.
Your worldview, is the Earth orbiting the sun in your worldview?
Yes.
Okay, so this deflection to try to woo the audience and trick them and confuse them with whether or not it's relative or absolute motion is irrelevant. Okay, it's literally irrelevant. It's just attempts to make sure that people don't actually get to the conclusion, which is why you interjected right then, right? So the Earth is moving.
It was you attributed to me a position that was not my position.
Wait, me saying the Earth is moving is a straw man?
I do not say that the Earth is moving. That would imply that I could tell you how fast it's moving. And I can't tell you how fast it's moving because things don't have velocities.
Wait, so we don't know how fast the Earth moves around the sun?
We know how fast it moves around the sun relative to the solar system, but that's not how fast it's moving. Things don't have velocities.
relative to the solar system? No.
And
Wait, isn't the orbital speed relative to the sun?
Well, I don't know what that means, right? I mean,
You don't know what it
relative to the
means.
sun. No, because relative to the sun, it's pretty much just at a constant distance, right? How is that moving relative to the sun? It's just out there. What
The
does that
Earth doesn't
mean,
move
moving
relative to the
relative
sun.
to the sun?
The Earth
You have
doesn't
to
move relative to the sun.
you have to bring in distant stars.
Well,
You have
this
to
is
establish a reference frame, right? Who's to say that the Earth
this is
is
weird.
moving relative to the sun? The
Einstein
only
Einstein said it
motion
was.
relative to the sun is back and forth. It gets a little further away, it gets a little closer.
Mm.
That's not
Einstein said it was
orbital
moving relative to the
velocity.
sun. Einstein said it was moving relative to the sun in Special and General Theory of Relativity, where he explains both papers. He specifically explains this difference when he explains MMX. He explains the difference in the reference frames of the motion of the Earth relative to the sun or
Right,
relative to
difference
the
in
reference
reference
frame of
frames.
the Earth.
That's the thing. The
Okay,
important thing.
so he said that the Earth is moving relative to the sun.
Well, okay, if you want to cast it that way, but without distant
Einstein
stars
cast it
If you want to cast it that way.
Yeah, it's
Einstein
not,
cast
because
it
if
that way.
all you had was the Earth and the sun, the only thing you would notice is the Earth moving a little away from it and then back toward it. Right? I mean, that's not the
So Einstein was
velocity we're
wrong.
talking about.
Einstein was wrong.
Well, I mean, I think it's just you misinterpreting him again. What happens in relativity is that the Earth at one time, it's not aberration right now, isn't due to the fact that the Earth is moving. It's
That's
due to the
weird
fact
because
that
Einstein, in his paper I just invoked, and literally in the preface before he gets into MMX, he brings up stellar aberration as one of the evidence of Earth's orbit.
right, and it is, but
Oh,
the point to understand is that right now the positions of all the stars in relativity, you have every right to think of the Earth as simply standing still. Right now,
stop
the Earth is in a
deflecting, bro.
reference frame. In its own reference frame, it's standing still. And the light that comes to us from stars simply reflects where those stars were when they emitted the light. That's it in
Is
relativity.
is stellar aberration evidence of Earth's orbital motion?
It's evidence that the Earth's reference frame changes in exactly the way that you would expect it to in the Newtonian paradigm, that 6 months from now, it's moving 60 kilometers per second in a different direction.
So you can't even
Bob
answer the
says that if
question
you try to
honestly.
explain anything with flat Earth knowledge, you will just mute yourself and ignore it.
So anyway, it's just like this is weird, and to be honest, all the Globers know it's weird too. Like he jumped in and interrupted and say, "That's a straw man. We don't claim the Earth is moving." What? You literally
We
do.
don't claim that anything is moving because things don't have velocity. It's not a property of an object.
That is not what
Acceleration
scientists say.
is a property.
That is not
Things
what astrologers and
have
scientists say.
acceleration.
Okay, so I'll just finish this up because I got stuff to do. So, according to Einstein, aberration is proof of orbital motion. He in fact explains it as a rotation, right? And it was later revised to revolution in subsequent publications. He specifically explains that it's moving. He explains the difference in relative to the sun or relative to Earth, what the motion would be. So anyway, and yeah, relative to, that's the same as saying reference frame. So that was also just another completely unnecessary interjection. But this is the point. According to your paradigm, right, the stars come in at an angle because the Earth is orbiting the sun. Okay, we do
No.
know that we have to tip no, it's not. So we do know we have to tip the telescope on Earth, right? So to get the star in the center of the telescope, we do have to tip it. That's a reality.
Tip
We have
it
to
from
tip
what?
it. We have to, from the Earth, when we want to get these stars in the center of our telescope, we angle the telescope. If we want to keep the star in the
No, we
center of our
simply
telescope,
point the telescope at the star.
when we want to actually keep it in the center, we have to slightly angle it.
No, we don't. We have
Okay,
to
so
put it on an
you claim that
equatorial
you did a
mount.
5
We have to put it on an
hour.
equatorial mount so that it can take into account the rotation of the Earth, but we don't have to tip the telescope. We just point the telescope at the star and we see it.
And what's the
Okay.
equatorial mount doing?
Wait up, dude. Let me just finish the thing, dude. I'm just trying to say one thing. According to their paradigm, and John can say no only once, so you can fact check it. Okay. According to them, aberration is due to the orbit of Earth. And that the star comes in an angle to Earth because the Earth is moving, right? And this changes throughout the year. So if the Earth is moving, causing the displacement of the star, or for it to come in at an angle akin to the rain, which he just said was an analogy accurate within relativity, okay? Like we're jogging through the rain, so it looks like it's coming in at an angle, right? If I put water in the telescope, that starlight is going to then slow down. So now it's going to take a longer time to get through the telescope. So if I look at the if it's akin to me sprinting as opposed to jogging, the angle's going to increase. Or it's actually akin to me sprinting and it moving at a certain angle, and then I slow down to jogging or walking. Now the angle is going to change because I'm going slower, right? The analogy perfectly would be me going from jogging to sprinting because I'm speeding up and the starlight is actually slowing down. But anyway, you guys get it. A change in the speed changes the angle, right, of the rain as I'm running through it. So as we slow the starlight down, it takes longer for it to get all the way through the telescope, right? Which means that the angle, by the time it actually gets all the way through the telescope, the angle is going to be larger because there's a greater time, right? Which means that the movement, in this case, assumed to be the Earth and telescope, has now covered a greater distance. Okay, so as the starlight comes in at an angle, allegedly because the Earth is orbiting the sun, once we put water in the telescope, the starlight gets in the telescope and slows down, the angle would increase. This didn't happen. It actually went the wrong way. So just saying no,
Wrong way. What does
doesn't
that
mean
mean?
anything.
What does the
Do you
wrong
know
way
what
mean?
it went the wrong direction?
What do you mean? Airy's failure was that he had to tilt the telescope in the other direction? Is that what you're
No,
claiming?
no, the deflection went the opposite way. The change in the deflection with the water was the wrong way. Okay, this is what I want you
Wait,
to
wait a
wait.
minute. I don't
Wait,
not
wait, wait.
understanding.
No, 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 because this,
Airy's
no, 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 no.
failure.
This is what always happens. You try to
No,
hone in on something other than the main point, and then I'll sit there for
so
seven
just like
hours. And John, answer the point that I'm making. Okay, if the star is coming at an angle because the Earth is moving, if I add water to the telescope and it slows down the starlight, is that going to increase the angle?
so that was the expectation before, like 40 years before. Fresnel had come up with his partial ether drag hypothesis to explain why we couldn't see the effect of motion through the ether in earlier experiments done around the 1800. I can't remember the one with prisms on the output of a telescope. It's in my series. I put the whole series in there. That he had come up with this hypothesis. That hypothesis applied to a water-filled telescope, the partial drag of the ether would render the effect invisible. In other words, Airy knew that because of the partial ether drag hypothesis, there would be no additional tilt of the telescope if you filled it with water. He knew that. And so when he saw that Klinkerfuse claimed that you did have to tilt it more, he was skeptical, which is why he redid the experiment, which failed to reproduce the results of Klinkerfuse as Airy expected.
Okay, you didn't address it again, bro, but I gotta go. I'll be back there.
So if you want the things, I put my 5-part series there, and I think you should start at part 1. But the meat is in the final 2. So number 4 deals with Airy's failure and things around that, and part 5 deals with what our model actually maintains, which is not what Witsit's model was. Witsit did a pretty good job of steel manning the Newtonian understanding of stellar aberration of 150 years ago. That was what physicists thought at the time. And I will say this, that I think it's still taught to students, much the way Witsit is talking about. That's probably why he probably thinks that's what physicists think, because that's what it says. That's what it says in textbooks even. But that's not the relativistic explanation. In the relativistic explanation, the Earth right now is stationary, and light comes to us from the positions of stars where they were when they emitted that light. That's all there is to it. 6 months from now, the Earth is once again stationary, and light comes to it from where they were when they emitted their light. But the weird thing, and this is why you certainly can reject it if you want, in relativity, the positions of those stars in the reference frame of the Earth 6 months from now are different from what they are in our current reference frame. The Lorentz transformation means that they're in different positions. And the aberration reflects the fact that the light is coming to us from a different place in the sky. That's most physicists even don't understand that, but that's what relativity says.
So they intentionally teach it wrong. That's what you're saying. Why do you think they do
They
that?
do. They teach a lot of things wrong.
Yeah, why?
I mean, they do. I think there's a lot of stuff that is taught wrong. Not so much that it's wrong. Stellar aberration is the way. If you use Newtonian theory along with Fresnel's partially
That's why I
drag
do.
thing,
I don't need a
you'll
monologue.
get the same
Question.
results.
Should I another question?
So, I'm sorry. What question did you ask? I will just answer it if I can.
Why do you think they treat it wrong? Like, why?
Oh, just because it's complicated. It's hard to, lots of times we skip over things because most of the stuff that I've learned have been a result of doing deep dives into things that most physicists don't really look at. You don't need to, because you don't have the answers wrong. You just don't fully understand it.
So, like, people are too dumb to learn it the proper way?
Because it's not, you don't, even in relativity, we often use the tilting umbrella paradigm. Lots of people say the relativistic aberration formula just differs by a tiny factor that doesn't matter with speeds like the speed of the Earth. And that's true, it does. But the implication is that it's just because the velocity makes a difference. But in relativity, things don't have velocities. So if you assign a velocity to something, you're already making a mistake. Things don't have velocities.
So there goes your explanation. When you drop a phone, you say that the Earth goes up to meet the phone, correct, John?
Well, no, I don't. What I say is that the Earth's surface is accelerating while the phone is not, right? And that's just verifiable, because if you put an accelerometer on the Earth, it will tell you that the surface of the Earth is accelerating upward, and it will tell you that the phone is not accelerating. In relativity, that's easy to understand because an inertial reference frame is a freely falling. Things that freely fall are things that do not accelerate. They have an acceleration of 0.
Weren't you just saying that the Earth was stationary?
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with that. Acceleration, I mean, part of the thing that I think you have trouble with, and it's fair enough, is that freely falling reference frames are local, right? If I go 1,000 miles away, freely falling reference frames are accelerating in a different direction. I shouldn't say accelerating, are getting closer. If I drop two things near the Earth, as they fall with 0 acceleration, they get closer to each other. Freely falling objects have this tendency to get closer together.
How do you have two things moving without acceleration or velocity?
How do you what?
You have two things moving. There's no acceleration. There's no velocity. How does that work?
Well, acceleration, of course, does mean, so if you have something that is accelerating, like the surface of the Earth, then its velocity relative to something that isn't accelerating will increase. And that's true. If I dig a deep well,
object that's accelerating, and then like I asked for, how do you have, right, two objects are getting closer to each other, and neither one's accelerating, and neither one has velocity. And then your example is one of them has acceleration.
So in the case, so suppose I dig a deep well and I hold a rock right near the surface of the Earth, right at the top of the well. Okay, and at some point I drop the rock. The surface of the Earth will increase its velocity relative to the rock over time. Right?
So there's no downward acceleration when you drop something?
Well, so we know for sure that the falling rock has 0 absolute acceleration. You can put an accelerometer on that rock, and it will tell you that its acceleration is 0. It's absolute acceleration. Acceleration is something that things have. A free-falling object has 0 absolute acceleration. And so if you drop that rock...
I hear how you are contradicting yourself. First you say the Earth is stationary, then you say it's orbiting around the sun, then you say it doesn't have velocity, but it's orbiting around the sun, and it's also accelerating upward at the same... Do you not hear yourself contradicting yourself? This makes no sense.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
why I brought it up.
He did
I
say,
think it's hard to understand, and I get
well,
that. It's why
yeah,
it's
I
better.
understand.
We should really stay in the Newtonian paradigm.
Right. So, I
But
mean, you
when
said you built your,
Jeremy
you,
tells me that my paradigm is the Newtonian paradigm, then I have to explain to you why it isn't. You can stick in the Newtonian paradigm if you want, and I'm comfortable working in the Newtonian paradigm
But you
because it
can't really
gives the right
explain it
answer.
you
without
said
convoluting everything.
you said you wrote your thesis on your undergrad thesis on black holes.
Yes.
So practically on
And
nothing.
it was published
Because I mean,
in
because
Physical Review, the
I
best
mean,
journal in physics.
right. I mean, shit.
People are
So I mean,
starving to
it's
waste their
like
money on that.
saying I wrote my undergrad thesis on mythological animal, and it gets published.
Okay, if it sounds like that to you, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that
Yeah,
isn't real.
that says a lot there.
Yeah, I know it does. Because I mean, yeah. When have you studied a black hole?
So, what
Yeah,
causes
exactly.
acceleration?
All I'd say to that is some people get things done and some people wonder what's going
What what causes acceleration to be
on.
something that's measurable? Absolutely.
Forces. The only thing that'll make something accelerate absolutely is a force. And so in the case of you, when you stand on the surface of the Earth, the surface of the Earth pushes up on you. That's what makes you accelerate.
Uh-huh. And so, when you talk about free fall, what? But isn't it gravity bringing something to free fall? Is gravity a
So
force?
do you want to work in the Newtonian? If you want to work in the Newtonian paradigm, let me know and I can do that. Shall we work in the Newtonian paradigm?
How Why about even whatever prefix reality is? acceleration with absolute? Why do that?
So it's only the
Uh,
absolute acceleration really only makes sense if you want to work in the relativistic paradigm. And I think it's a much more conceptually simple, but it does conflict with our intuition a lot more.
Absolute acceleration in
Requires
contradistinction to what?
foundational education.
No, it works Newtonianly because in Newtonian we have absolute space. So with respect to that coordinate system, you can measure acceleration absolutely. You
Right.
got to make sense out
Well,
of
you
that
can
term they
measure
use.
it, but not
Absolute acceleration in
absolutely. Right.
contradistinction to what? You got to make sense out of that term as though it's meaningful, right? What does it even mean to say that term? Absolute acceleration in
What?
contradistinction to what?
So So here's the thing about absolute acceleration. I can have a
Zero
device.
absolute acceleration.
Let's just understand what an accelerometer is. Your phone has an accelerometer in it. You can consult it and it will tell you that you're accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared upward. It will tell you that because it has an accelerometer in it. And what an accelerometer does is it simply measures the stresses on, it's like a little piezoelectric crystals, I think, in your phone. It's simply without reference to any external thing, right? It doesn't look at the tree over there. It doesn't see how fast your wheels are running along the ground or anything like that. It's a fully self-contained little box. It refers to nothing external to itself, and it tells you what the acceleration of that box is. It doesn't have
It's
to
actually
look
measuring
at
the
it,
response to
see
inertia.
anything. It's an inertial thing. That's right. Acceleration is measured. You know that you're accelerating when, like, if you hang a mass, if a mass is attached to a spring, and the spring is stretched, then that mass is accelerating. If the spring isn't stretched, and there's no other forces acting on it, then it isn't accelerating.
Yeah, but So then for you have to instance, when I'm talk about talking to what's you to the try to cause make of my understanding inertia. meaningful, What is inertia? Because what is inertia will point you to why you can measure absolute acceleration regardless of your frame. but he still didn't answer my
Yeah, that's
question.
true. It requires
It
requires inertia. That's right.
Somebody should do a one-on-one with John then. So PIEZO, did you want to go back and forth with John because it gets if multiple people are jumping in with different points?
I mean, I can just a little bit. I think that the thing that's always like glossed over is the essence of inertia, which I don't think is even well explained in any framework of physics, because inertia is this resistance to the change of state of motion of an object of mass. But then if you ask like what causes inertia, it's said to just be a property of all objects with
Yeah.
mass.
I kind of
Right, but
agree
if-
with you. I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's a little mysterious.
Yeah, but
Okay, but you didn't answer my
it
question
works the same
earlier.
way. Inertia, you can use the idea of comparative inertia to see where inertia comes from, because if you use the idea of comparative inertia, if you put an object in like a swimming pool, for example, that object in that swimming pool will have inertia from the fluid that it's in the pool. Because when you move the object through the pool, you have to move the fluid out of the way in order to get it to move. So that fluid that's already present resists the motion of the object that's being pushed through it. And so, if you can use fluid dynamics even to model inertia as well.
I'm not sure I understand that exactly.
It would be an implication that there's like a fluid in space or some type of medium, and that constitutes the basis for inertia because everything's moving through it, therefore resisting its change of motion state.
Yeah, that's kind of what people say when they talk about the Higgs field, if you've ever looked into the Higgs boson. And I will say, I don't really understand it myself, but the Higgs field is supposed to be the reason that the thing that confers mass. I mean, I'm just parroting words. I don't understand this stuff, so I'll just tell you that right off the bat.
Well, whichever field you ascribe it to, and that's probably largely accurate. What you just said is like a pretty broad overview summary. But if you treat it as a Higgs field or whatever field you want to treat it as, it's deemed to be universally present, right? It's not, and it works as a universal frame. And the thing is if you have what's effectively a universal frame, because it doesn't move, it doesn't get manipulated, it's just present everywhere, and it gives rise to mass and thereby inertia. If it's present everywhere and it's the thing with respect to which acceleration is measured, then that is your absolute space.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, I get how you might think that, but that I do know isn't what the Higgs field works like. The Higgs field gives things inertia, but it doesn't provide, if the Higgs field did what you said, you could use it to build a device that would tell you how fast you're moving. And you can't.
Well,
there's no mechanism
acceleration
to
and
do
velocity are
that.
different, right? But you just
Right.
acknowledge that the accelerometer doesn't reference the outside world at all. That is an quote unquote absolute acceleration. And the reason it's absolute is because it's made with respect to the world frame itself, not any custom frame within it. That's what makes it absolute. So you already actually acknowledge that.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I do acknowledge that acceleration is absolute. That is to say that when something is accelerating, it's accelerating at the same rate relative to anything that isn't accelerating.
Would you agree that
Like I could make a cluster of things that are in free fall. They're all moving in different directions, but they're all not accelerating. And something that does have an absolute acceleration will have the same acceleration relative to all of those things.
Well, acceleration is the change in velocity, right? Something can have a constant velocity and not be accelerating, but
change. Yeah.
But a change in the rate of change. Yeah, but acceleration is required to change an object's velocity. It has to either accelerate or decelerate. And since acceleration is an intrinsic part of motion, right? In order to create motion, there must be an acceleration. And so if all motion is relative, then it ought to stand to reason that all acceleration should therefore also be relative to the same coordinate system that the motion is measured with respect to. But it's not. Acceleration is deemed to be absolute, and it's acknowledged. So why is motion therefore not also acknowledged to be absolute?
Well, I mean, I don't think I have the burden of the proof here. The point is, it's simple to make a self-contained device that will tell you its acceleration. That's easy to do, and it works everywhere in the universe. It works in outer space. They have things like this on space probes to tell the telemetry the acceleration of the object when its rockets are firing, right? You need to know that to know if you have changed the velocity enough. Not because you know the velocity, you don't know the velocity, but you do know how much you need to change the velocity. You can tell how much the velocity of an object has changed, but you don't know what its velocity was at the beginning, and you don't know what it was at the end. You only know that it accelerated at a certain rate for a certain amount of time, which will now tell you how much its velocity has changed.
It's
Yeah, but being
incoherent.
able to know past states of motion is irrelevant to a present measurement. Measurement doesn't deal with anything from the past. Measurement is always present. All measurements are always present. So like that's kind of a non sequitur in terms of defining, frames with respect to which motion is measured and or acceleration is measured. My argument here is that if motion, right, is relative, then it stands to reason that acceleration should also be relative because acceleration is the very thing that gives rise to motion. If acceleration is acknowledged to be absolute, how can motion itself also not be absolute because they are measured with respect to the same frames?
No, that's just not true. Acceleration isn't measured. Absolute acceleration is not measured relative to any frame. It's measured entirely internally to a little device called an accelerometer. It doesn't require knowledge. It doesn't require using any frame. The acceleration of an object is read out by an accelerometer. You don't have to have a reference frame. Now you can measure what's called coordinate acceleration. If you have a reference frame like the Earth, right? I can say there's a car sitting there. It's not accelerating. And when you say that, you mean its coordinate acceleration is 0, and everybody understands that. And now it steps on the gas and starts moving, and now it's accelerating northward. Its northward velocity is getting greater. Those are all examples of coordinate acceleration, not absolute acceleration.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was actually going there next. So if you are suggesting that there's a distinction between the coordinate acceleration of an object on Earth and its absolute acceleration in the universe frame, then that would mean that if we don't calibrate an accelerometer, if we don't zero it out with its reading when it's just sitting there on a table, not moving in our frame, if we don't do that, then that means that accelerometers should be picking up our acceleration through the universe itself as our galaxy, which is flying in some crazy speed in a line somewhere, is being pulled sideways by all the other objects with mass, and we're tracing this giant arc through space. It should be picking up that acceleration of that arc.
Yes,
and it doesn't do that.
And I think the mistake you make there.
I need to clarify that, John.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tony.
So the acceleration, while the velocities that galaxies exhibit, that we detect if galaxies are large, the accelerations are small. Similarly, our motion through the galaxy, while the velocity is large, the acceleration is small. So you're quite right.
John?
But let me just say, Tony, I was going to go a slightly different direction, and that is to point out because what he had meant is this is Jesus Christ, I guess. Thank you, Jesus. What you referred to the universal reference frame. There's no, and that's I think part of the problem when we talk about something having an absolute acceleration of 0. That's just relative to right where it is. Right where it is, we look at freely falling objects. Those freely falling objects have 0 acceleration. But if you look at some other place, you'll say, well, wait a minute, those things are accelerating relative to this thing. And I would understand what you mean. They're getting closer to it and they're speeding up. They're getting closer at a faster rate. And yet they both have 0 acceleration. That's the nature of freely falling objects. Freely falling objects can move away from each other and they can move back toward each other. And they have 0, they both have 0 acceleration. When I throw an object upward and a person on the other side of the Earth throws an object upward, they move away from each other at first and then they move toward each other. And the entire time, they both have 0 absolute acceleration.
Yeah, so I need to address both of you, I guess, separately right now. So I guess I'll address
I'm
both
going to
of
let
these
Tony
points.
take it for a while. I've been doing this for a while. I probably will take a little break, but why don't you talk with Tony for a while?
Yeah, well, I'll just tag on to the end of what you said, then I'll address what Tony said. But for you to say that it's only with respect to where it already is right now, what you're saying when you say that is that measurement is with respect to itself. Like that doesn't exist in any relativistic framework. With respect to itself means absolute space. So that your statement would not be accepted in a mainstream framework. And as far as what Tony said, he said that these accelerations in the universe are extremely small. So he's suggesting that that's the reason an accelerometer wouldn't pick it up. But an accelerometer can pick up very, very small accelerations. We can get down to
what are the non-inertial accelerations that that Earth is?
Dude, can you wait until I
subject to?
finish? I allowed you to speak. Stop cutting in, please. So the accelerations that accelerometers are able to measure, depending on what grade of accelerometer you can get ones that are down to the centimeters per second squared. You can get really good ones that are down to micrometer or even nanometer per second squared accelerations. And for you to suggest that a galaxy like ours, that's in the mainstream model, that's flying at literally millions of miles an hour through space, while at the same time being pulled sideways by other galaxies and massive objects, create an arc pattern that is thereby yielding an acceleration component, to say that acceleration on these scales would not be detectable by a device that can measure nanometers per second squared is absurd.
Okay.
We would measure it if we were moving.
What are the non-gravitational accelerations that the solar system is experiencing?
Why are you asking me a question and not addressing what I just said?
Because accelerometers can only detect non-gravitational accelerations. They can only detect non-inertial accelerations.
Why is that?
Because they don't detect coordinate system artifacts, because those are, as has been explained to you, coordinate accelerations, not absolute accelerations. They only detect absolute accelerations.
Wasn't John's original claim that you could use accelerometers to detect Earth's motion?
No,
doubt
it was
it,
not.
because
I
you
need
can't.
to chime in to say that was not my claim.
Because you can't. That's one of the fundamental principles of relativity, is that using an instrument you can't detect Earth's motion. Using an instrument that's on Earth, you can only detect Earth's motion by looking at things that aren't Earth and aren't on Earth. So
but if acceleration is absolute, then why wouldn't you be able to detect any acceleration? Because that's what absolute means. Any and all accelerations would be detected.
No, only it's absolute. So if I've got two reference frames, right, one in which a person is accelerating, and I put a person in that reference frame, they are going to see that the other person is accelerating, but they're not. So their perception of that acceleration is reference frame dependent. This is the difference.
That doesn't make any sense for a device, Tony.
You asked that you not be interrupted, and then as soon as I'm one sentence into what I'm saying, you choose to interrupt me. Are we going to be consistent here?
Go ahead.
So, yes. And since you've chosen to be condescending about it, I'll extend the length of what I'm going to say. So, in order to distinguish between accelerations that result from frame of reference artifacts and accelerations that actually correspond to forces, we introduce the distinction between absolute accelerations and coordinate accelerations. A coordinate acceleration is an acceleration in a particular reference frame, and that includes frame of reference and induced accelerations. Absolute accelerations, which is what, by definition, accelerometers detect, does not include coordinate accelerations.
Okay, so when you say you can take two individuals in two different reference frames, and for each individual they'll measure the other person as being the one that's accelerating. When you say measure, that's false. Because when you measure something, okay, measurements like a device does not care about your mental ideas of what a reference frame is. Reference frames do not physically exist. They are abstract constructs of the human mind. The device, whatever device you choose, will always feel what is actually happening. So saying that two people, because I can define you and me, we could be sitting side by side on a couch, and I could define one coordinate system centered on you and another coordinate system centered on me, and one of us could move, and you would say that, oh, in the two different coordinate systems, they're moving differently. The device is going to measure one reading, period. And that's going to be
Okay, how do you
quote unquote
measure?
absolute acceleration. The device does
How
not care whether I create an artificial frame or not. And so if you acknowledge that there is such a thing as absolute acceleration, which there is, because that's the only way you can get out of the Sagnac or try to get out of the Sagnac effect, right? Because you say it's accelerating and that's what's being measured. So if you acknowledge that acceleration is absolute, for example, in the case of rotation, then that means that you are establishing some frame that is the same no matter where you measure it from in the universe. And so within this frame in which acceleration is measured to be absolute, we do not measure the motion of Earth, not only around the sun, but neither through the galaxy nor of the galaxy throughout the universe. There's all kinds of different velocity and acceleration vectors that would be getting summed together at all points in time in this Big Bang cosmology, and none of it's felt. We're not moving.
Are you done? Are you done now? So what you said,
Tony, the
what you
point
said
is
was
we're not
absolute
moving.
nonsense. There are two ways of measuring acceleration. One of the ways of measuring acceleration is by looking at the rate of looking at the second derivative of position. So that is what that's coordinate acceleration, right? So you can measure coordinate acceleration in different reference frames, and you will get different results for the coordinate acceleration because coordinate acceleration is reference frame dependent. Yes, there is absolute acceleration, and so if you've got an accelerometer, if both of the observers in the two reference frames have accelerometers, they will get a consistent result. They will be able to tell how much of their relative acceleration is due to actual accelerations. And as has been mentioned previously, it is possible for two people in different reference frames to observe a coordinate acceleration towards one another or away from one another, and to both not be experiencing acceleration. There is no acceleration occurring, but they can measure a coordinate acceleration between them. That is entirely possible. If, for instance, you drop an object under gravitational acceleration towards the sun, and then a few minutes later you fire one upwards away from the sun, they will both experience Earth's gravitational acceleration, but they will seem to be going away from one another.
That's begging the question.
You seem fundamentally incapable of understanding that that the non-inertial accelerations don't tell you anything about the relative motion between objects. Because coordinate acceleration is not the same as absolute acceleration.
Okay. I hear your mantra that they're not the same. I get that. I'm not contesting that they're not the same, but you also use the term actual acceleration in that statement, which you are listing to be synonymous with absolute acceleration. So in your fictitious example where, or the one that John gave, where you have two people on different places on Earth who drop objects, and since they're falling towards the center of a ball, they're technically getting closer to one another without actually measuring it as such. That is begging the question. I do not buy into your globular framework, so that doesn't count as an example. Secondly, anytime that you actually, quote unquote, measure absolute acceleration, the actual measurements, which are absolute, not your coordinate system conventions where you're defining acceleration, not measuring, that's the difference. You keep conflating defining versus measure. When you're measuring acceleration, anytime we measure stuff, it's always with respect to the Earth frame. You actually are not able to get a real measurement that's not with respect to the Earth frame. Our Earth inertial frame is the only true inertial frame that anyone has ever taken any measurement with respect to. They can make definitions, redefine measurements, and convert them to different coordinate systems, but the measurements themselves, which do not care about human convention, are always with respect to the Earth, which is inertial.
So once again, it doesn't give you a cop out. What I'm almost done. It doesn't give you a cop out as to why we wouldn't be experiencing any of these other accelerations, because absolute acceleration is not defined as with respect to Earth. Absolute acceleration is simply the same type of acceleration that any object experiences with respect to the distant stars, Machian. That's why it's called absolute rotation in the Sagnac effect. So under that definition, which is the accepted definition, you are incorrect. We absolutely should be experiencing and feeling and measuring, the key point, the acceleration vectors of all the different forces pulling us and pushing us throughout the universe in an arc.
So at this point, you had
change in direction.
The start of your statement was, "I hear your explanation. I just reject it." Okay. Well, that's great. You can be wrong. You've got every right to be wrong, but you can go talk to any physicist, and they will explain to you that you're wrong. And the fact that you insist on being wrong, despite the fact that subject matter experts explain to you that you're wrong, is sorry. I thought we'd agreed not to interrupt one another.
I mean, all you're doing is saying you're wrong.
No, I thought we had agreed that, and apparently your Christianity extends as far as being a rude loudmouth prick. So
you're the only one insulting anyone here.
That's been explained to you, and you're refusing to accept it. When you say the inertial Earth frame are accepting, if you look up the definition of the Earth-centered inertial frame, you will see that that is distinct from the Earth-centered Earth-fixed reference frame, which is rotating. So you are self-defeating. The scientific principles that you are invoking about Earth's inertial frame accept that the Earth is in motion around the sun and that the Earth is rotating on an axis. You can look up the scientific definition of the ECI and it will directly contradict you. So you are appealing to scientific concepts that directly contradict your fundamental position. And that makes you fatuous.
I didn't invoke either of those two frames there, baby boy.
You invoked the Earth inertial frame.
No, I said an Earth inertial frame. I didn't say the ECI or ECEF. There's a difference between those. Maybe you should think about that before you try to accuse people. Good job.
You invoked the ECI. You invoked the ECI. You said the Earth inertial frame.
At all, bro.
That is the ECI.
I said an Earth inertial frame. I didn't say ECI. Good try.
Well, point to a scientifically recognized inertial frame that is on Earth that is not the ECI.
Appeal to authority, appeal to credentials.
That's not an appeal to authority or an appeal to credentials.
You're telling me I can't have any frame other than people with credentials that have defined it in their framework. I don't have to accept anybody else's framework. I can just accept the world we live in there, buddy. I don't have to buy into anybody else's ideology.
Yes, you cannot demonstrate that your position is not delusional. In order to demonstrate that your position is not delusional, you must find a recognized body of subject matter experts that agree with your interpretation.
No, I don't. You are subjecting me to your own framework that I do not accept.
If you cannot, you have no guarantee that your position is not simply a result of a recognized body of subject matter experts that agree with your interpretation.
No, I don't. You are subjecting me to your own framework that I do not accept.
If you cannot, you have no guarantee that your position is not simply a result of your personal intellectual incapacity.
Even if I did that, it still wouldn't be a guarantee. It still wouldn't be a guarantee. Peer-reviewed research and papers have been wrong so many times. That's not a guarantee of anything. So you're trying to subject me to a subjective standard that in and of itself is not even infallible to claim that I'm fallible. That's absurd. Nobody in here, maybe not nobody, I shouldn't say that. I personally don't. I do not buy into your ad hominem, appeal to authority, appeal to credential, fallacious reasoning. Okay? I don't need to have some scientist in some lab that I don't work in that works somewhere else aside from me, or one from a lab I do work in, to agree with me in order for my idea to be valid. That is something that you have bought into. You have subjected yourself to that ideology. You have given up your own intellectual agency to other people and believe that any idea that you come up with cannot be true unless other people agree with it. Truth is not based upon consensus. Hey, I'm still talking. Truth is not based upon consensus. I said an Earth inertial frame, just meaning a frame in which Earth is not moving. It doesn't need to be a specifically defined ECI or ECEF or any other frame that you think that you know of. I'm just saying a frame where Earth's not moving. In my frame where Earth's not moving, it's also not spinning, it's not orbiting, it's not doing anything. It's absolutely at rest and still. So in that frame, which is where we live because you can't demonstrate otherwise, that accelerometer should be picking up every type of motion or every type of acceleration that exists. The fact that it does not is a positive measurement of the lack of such motion.
Okay. But in order to defend your irrationality, you're invoking more irrationality. In order to claim that the universe is revolving around the Earth, even though the objects in the universe exhibit individual motions, so these objects exhibit individual motions that are not in agreement with one another, but you are saying that they are all accelerating around the Earth on a roughly 24-hour basis. What is the force that is moving them in this 24-hour rotation around the Earth? Why is it that this force acts on every object in the universe, every observable object in the universe at the same time, but individual objects move relative to one another within that? Why is it? Why are there? All of a sudden, you have introduced multiple additions.
You're right.
You have abandoned any explanation of what the forces involved are. You simply don't know, nor can you imagine one. So you've completely and then you appeal to an unvalidated physical principle to that Machian acceleration. Machian accelerations are understood to only apply if you are within the sport shield radius of the rotating body. You haven't demonstrated that for Earth and the universe. And you are using this to ignore a bunch of stuff. For instance, you're introducing forces to the motion of physical gyroscopes, but then you have to appeal to something completely different in order to explain ring laser gyroscopes. So you have again multiplied your entities. This is just irrational. It contradicts the parsimony that is inherent in scientific investigation. So in order to defend one irrationality, you have invoked another 3 irrational beliefs in order to substantiate your position. And then you claim, well, just because nobody else believes it, that doesn't make me irrational. No, if you hold a view of reality that is in contradiction to the rest of reality, you are by definition delusional.
Yeah, do me a favor, try to stop the personal attacks. Stop the, if you don't appeal to credentials, appeal authority, you're delusional, you lack intellectual capacity, you're irrational. Please stop with all the personal attacks and also keep it concise. If you can, just so someone can address your points and have to address your personal attacks. Thank you.
All right, but that was all.
Can you validate any of yours? Because you said anything that you haven't validated, that we don't validate that. I'm sorry for Gio. I didn't know he was trying to. I didn't know Gio was trying to moderate.
No, I just think it's a one-on-one. But just say your point again, though, real quick. But I think it's a one-on-one with PIEZO because he just said all that to PIEZO. So
it's okay. I got it. Thank you, Gio. Thank you. Yeah, so, man, like, he's going on for so long, and I'm having to remember all the things I need to address. So remind me, somebody, if I forget and leave something out. But anyways.
He said you haven't validated one.
So first of all, I'm not making up or multiplying entities. By you saying that I can't explain the force or even imagine a force that would cause all these things to take place, that's patently false. Number one, I don't need to, but I could. And just because I could doesn't mean that it's true, but just to, play into this framework, just for a temporary point in time, I'll go ahead and do that for you. In a Machian analysis of the universe, the entirety of observations that humanity have observed would be the same as what we do observe now. The only thing that would be needed would be a prime mover to set the system into rotation, because once it was put into rotation, the summation of the centrifugal, centripetal, Coriolis, and Euler forces would keep the universe rotating perpetually. Now, then you would, might want to go on into a tangent, which I don't care to do right now. I don't want to go down that road because I want to finish our conversation about who set it into motion. That would be the creator. But either way, I'm not going to do that. But that's just to refute your point that I can't do that. Second of all, whether or not I give you a substantive explanation of the actual physical origin of the forces causing the heavenly bodies to orbit us does nothing to support your position that we're in fact the ones moving. Because I can look up in the sky and see things moving. My lack of an ability to tell you what the physical source of that motion is does not lend credence to your point, because your framework is also known to be false. It doesn't even explain things properly or correctly. The gravitational model does not work. That's why 97% of all the matter and energy in the universe is said to be dark matter and dark energy, some fictitious fundamental incorrect error about the model you believe in. It's fundamentally false. It's wrong. It's just a quantification of your error that can't be explained. So someone invented an entity to explain it. That's what dark matter and dark energy are. So those two entities have already been multiplied into your framework, and they still fail to actually account for what we observe. The gravitational model has been dead for a long time. They've tried to hot fix it and patch it for over 50 or 60 years, and they've failed to do so the entire time. So even if I don't say, here's the reason, here's the force causing the stars and the planets to orbit us, does not mean that you are by default correct. Now, as far as your other claim, you were speaking about how I'm delusional, blah blah blah. I'm not going to address the personal attacks, but one of the reasons you tried to claim that is because you said that I'm multiplying entities, talking about differences between gyroscopes, like a physical mechanical gyroscope and a ring laser gyroscope. And the truth is that the reason that these gyroscopes experience these forces when sitting, I'm assuming you mean by sitting still, right? Because you're referencing a ring laser gyroscope. I can only imagine and presume that's what you're talking about. Is all the same source. There is a medium in space, which many people refer to as the ether, which is circling us. And that motion from it is translated and comes up as differentials in the measurement devices that we use. It's a differential in an optically based device, just as it is a differential in a sufficiently sensitive mechanical device, though it's extremely difficult to get those to read, but there have been some apparently that have. Either it's the same thing that happens with pendulums when pendulums are actually real and measuring real things and not the ones that are forced with motors and stuff. There have been a few pendulums experiments that have actually been done properly who have demonstrated similar effects and have also demonstrated effects that don't fit into your framework, such as the Elias effect and the Deverdan-Rescue-Antonescu effect. And you guys completely deny those, though they were done with perfectly sound science simply because they don't fit in your framework. So I'm not the one who multiplies entities. Your framework already has, and whether or not I can give you a totally inclusive explanation of like a omniscient view of reality to tell you what the source origin of the forces causing the stars to orbit us is, whether I'm able to do that or not doesn't make you correct.
Okay, to refute these, rotation cannot continue without a central force. So even if we accept the assertion that some agent rotated the rest of the universe, it would not continue in rotation if you didn't have a centripetal force acting on the bodies. They would go in a straight line. So the claim that rotation can continue without a constant centripetal force is a fundamental misunderstanding of the physics of circular motion. The idea that dark matter invalidates gravity. No, it doesn't. Gravity works inside the solar system. Gravity works on Earth. We use gravity to map the ocean floor. We use gravity to map. We use gravity to track underground mineral deposits. We use gravity to navigate submarines. Gravity has very real practical applications on which you and your colleagues depend. The existence of anomalous readings in distant galaxies is by no means a reason to throw out a successful theory that applies in our on Earth. And delusionality is not dependent on model. So here's the thing: the reason I do not assert that I have sufficient understanding of other scientific disciplines that I'm an expert that I can come in. So I was invited, for instance, back when I was a Christian, I was invited to sign that petition, the petition about PhDs who didn't find evolution a scientifically satisfactory model. And that really shocked me that I was asked to sign that, because it never occurred to me that I knew enough about evolution to make that statement. I cannot make the statement, but I understand. Sorry, I'm sorry. You were allowed to talk uninterrupted. Why is the same courtesy not?
Because he was on topic.
Okay, so but I am on topic. Delusionality is the definition of delusion is having a view of reality that is not accepted by the majority of other people. There can be multiple people who share the same delusion. That doesn't make them right. And you have to defend when you can adopt a novel mindset. You can adopt a novel idea, but in order to make sure that you aren't slipping into a potentially delusional avenue, you need to check it with reality. You need to check it.
We have a time out so that like a mod can like keep going in circles about a
I'm not accepting I'm not accepting that my opponent gets to interrupt me.
Can you stop talking over the mod?
Dude, now you're going into this whole meta discussion about delusions and how delusionality has to do with the not accepting the consensus of the people around you. Delusion. Okay, just to clarify, because that's not true, and you're accusing him of being delusional. Delusional means you have beliefs and judgments about reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence. It has nothing to do with any amount of consensus. So that what you're talking about is disorderly, and someone being disorderly is not. Don't call someone delusional. You're gaslighting him. And please stop with the insults. And then the last thing I just want to add, please just stay on topic. We don't want to hear about your personal life. We don't want to hear insults made to your interlocutor. Please address the points that the gentleman made.
Okay. Well, let's get back to that. There is incontrovertible evidence that the Earth is moving. How do we know that it is incontrovertible? It is incontrovertible because the entirety of the body of science agrees that it is incontrovertible. The entirety of the body of science. One sentence back into it, and he's interrupting me again. And I noticed that the moderator has nothing to fucking say.
If we can stay on topic, then that would be a good thing to talk about, I think.
Yes, I am on topic. The topic is whether or not there is incontrovertible evidence against your position, and there is. And you simply deny it, which is the definition. We are getting into definitions here, and in order to protect yourself from going down these rabbit holes, you have to be very disciplined in your thought processes. And saying that you don't, and that you're at liberty to deny anything for which there is, just say, I don't consider that incontrovertible evidence, is to pave the way to disconnect yourself from reality. And you can say that this is an ad hom. It is objective fact. If you refuse
instead of
to
talking about me and ad homing, provide the evidence.
and the fact that you're just talking over me does not defend your position.
Moderator,
If you just say that is an incontrovertible evidence, that does not make your argument rational.
That's not what's happening. I asked you to provide it and stop ad homing me and going on tangents about delusion. Just give the evidence you claim that I'm denying.
For instance, the Elias effect that you mentioned. The Elias effect is unable to be replicated. The attempts to replicate the Elias effect have failed. So that's an observation that mainstream science needs to take into account is nonsense. It only becomes an observation that we need to care about once it is replicatable. And in order to replicate, and it is reported as a deviation from rotation-induced precession. So in order to accept that the Elias effect is real, you have to accept that the precession effect is real. So it is irrational to appeal to the existence of the Elias effect in order to claim that the precession effect doesn't occur. That is simple irrationality. You are appealing to an evidentiary data set that directly contradicts you in order to say, but there's some perturbation to that, which might agree with me sometime later down the track once it's been replicated and once it's been properly analyzed. That is not a rational line of reasoning.
Okay, so you need to stop performing a bait and switch in which you have to try to force the claims I make to be interpreted through your framework in order to analyze them for their credibility. Okay, I don't accept your framework, so trying to force everything that I provide you with to be interpreted exclusively through your framework, which you're begging the question a priority in the beginning to posit, is not a proper way to analyze what I'm bringing to the table. Furthermore, your assertion that the Elias effect has not been corroborated is patently false. There have been multiple studies conducted in which they did, in fact, measure it. And if you want, I can go ahead and post one of those in the chat right now.
Yes, and there have been multiple studies in which they have attempted to replicate the Elias effect and have failed.
No, they haven't. You
are cherry picking. You are cherry picking data that supports your conclusion and saying that is true. And you are doing the same thing that Witsit does. Just because you're relying on a data set, you are relying on a data set that shows rotational precession. And then you are saying there's this deviation from this rotational precession. But I reject that the rotational precession is accurate, but I accept that the perturbation from it is accurate. And you cannot see.
I didn't say that. You put those words in my mouth. Stop strawmanning me. Stop strawmanning me.
You can wait until I'm finished in order to make your counterpoint. Done, Gally.
Tony, you're cutting out. So he did say straw man. Why don't we let him clarify the straw man? That was the agreement. And you were cutting out. So why don't we just take this chance to let him clarify that real quick?
Yeah, I am not saying that, oh, the source of the precession is not accurate, but the effect of the perturbation within it is. I acknowledge that there's a rotation induced precession. I just reject that the rotation is that of the earth. It's that of the heavens or the ether. That's the rotation that causes the effect, not earth rotation.
But you
So you're
said
strawman.
but you said that pendulum. You said that pendulum. You said that pendulum data is unreliable.
What?
That was one of the things you said. You said
What
the
are you
pendulum
talking about?
observations. You said you did say this earlier. You said that okay. If you're not willing to, then what is the point of the Elias effect?
No, what I was saying earlier is clarify.
Isn't the Elias effect a demonstration that you're so if you say that the precession effect is due to the rotation of the universe, isn't any deviation from that evidence against the rotation of the universe?
Okay. So the thing I was saying about pendulums earlier, I was saying that in studies where you do have sufficiently sensitive pendulums that can mechanical ones or mechanical gyroscopes and pendulums that do pick up the effect, because a lot of pendulums are actually powered through feedback amplifiers that force it to continuously oscillate within Yeah, I am not saying that, oh, the source of the precession is not accurate, but the effect of the perturbation within it is. I acknowledge that there's a rotation induced precession. I just reject that the rotation is that of the earth. It's that of the heavens or the ether. That's the rotation that causes the effect, not earth rotation.
But you
So you're
said
strawman.
but you said that pendulum. You said that pendulum. You said that pendulum data is unreliable.
What?
That was one of the things you said. You said
What
the
are you
pendulum
talking about?
observations. You said you did say this earlier. You said that okay. If you're not willing to, then what is the point of the Elias effect?
No, what I was saying earlier is clarify.
Isn't the Elias effect a demonstration that you're so if you say that the precession effect is due to the rotation of the universe, isn't any deviation from that evidence against the rotation of the universe?
Okay. So the thing I was saying about pendulums earlier, I was saying that in studies where you do have sufficiently sensitive pendulums that can mechanical ones or mechanical gyroscopes and pendulums that do pick up the effect, because a lot of pendulums are actually powered through feedback amplifiers that force it to continuously oscillate within a set parameters. That is a forced effect. I'm talking about like paraconical pendulums that are operated in a genuine and not rigged or forced way that are used to measure effects like this. So there's a difference. I wasn't discounting the evidence of pendulums. I was specifically discounting the ones that are forced into their trajectory. Now, as far as the Elias effect goes, the point of the Elias effect is that the period shifts during an eclipse, and it cannot be explained at all through gravity or any other classical forces in the mainstream.
That's a in order to and that's not actually a valid recitation of the events. So they're not explainable by the moon's gravity or the Earth's gravity, but they could, for instance, be so there are gravitational measurements, right? But they could be explainable by, for instance, temperature-induced mass redistributions as you enter an eclipse. When it gets very dark, there are significant temperature changes. and this can introduce a mass redistribution inside the atmosphere.
No, bro, it's inside of the laboratory in which it's climate controlled.
Yes, and if it's done in a laboratory, and that can in turn induce a rotational effect as well. So there are atmospheric time. There are. You might want to be quiet and listen. There are in fact atmospheric induced shifts in rotation, right?
Really? Isn't it? I mean, it's important to acknowledge the fact that this Elias effect is not corroborated. The evidence for it is slim at best.
It is corroborated. I just give you a paper corroborating it where they did measurements for 18 years.
Paper, yes, but I mean, the scientific community certainly doesn't accept it.
The scientific community's consensus certainly doesn't accept heliocentrism.
I am pointing out that
right?
if there weren't results that contradict it, the scientific community would be all over it. It's not. It is not reliably. It's not reliably observed. Period.
You say reliably. This is the same
You're
exact
doing a
thing
great job with
everyone-
moderation. Well done. Jesus didn't interrupt John at all.
This is the same exact that he interjected, bro, and I still let him speak. It's just I was trying to tap in because he interjected.
Tony finished speaking, and I pointed something out. Now I'm going away again, but I just didn't want anybody. When you start saying, "Well, here's what could explain it," it isn't even a well demonstrated effect. It hasn't been well demonstrated.
Bro, this is the same thing you guys do with interferometry, right? Because when people have demonstrated, multiple groups of people, many sets of measurement have demonstrated the sidereal time sinusoidal periodicity in the ether wind with interferometry. And then you guys go and you say, oh, well, look at these ones that didn't. And the methodology to measure it is completely different because the people who claim that they didn't measure it went into giant basements encased in concrete and put them inside vacuum chambers to measure it. And the people who did measure it specifically said you can't do that because it destroys the amplitude of the signal. It makes the signal almost a DC signal. So you're not going to measure the actual time-based components when you do that. That's what's happening here. You're doing the same thing. You're saying, oh, well, a bunch of people did it using the methodology of the original person who measured it. And when they did it the same way he did it, they measured it. But all these other people who did it with different methodologies didn't measure it. It just seems like it's not very real, or I can't really trust that it's consistent. It's just a hit job, bro. You guys are doing the same thing that you do with interferometry. You're finding a way to reject any evidence that contradicts your opinion. And when people do give evidence that contradict your opinion, I'm almost finished. When people do give evidence that does contradict your opinion and your framework, and it does get peer-reviewed and published, the very few times that happens, such as physical review letters in Ruyong Wong's work, you don't actually have any real substantive ways to explain it, so you get someone to come along and try to create a thought experiment to explain away the results that has no bearing on reality and doesn't actually resolve it at all. That's what always happens.
Did you even listen to yourself just now? That was a tour de force.
Yeah. So to respond to this, the people who do their experiments and subject them to thermal noise get a particular signal, and the people who don't subject their experiments to the same thermal noise don't get the signal. What does this tell you about the alleged signal? That it is very likely induced by thermal noise and not to do with the motion of the Earth. And similarly, John is absolutely right. While there may be physical explanation, my position is that there are physical explanations for the anomalous behaviors that are observed, that are reported in some studies. But John is absolutely correct that it is not reliably observed. And if it was some sort of rule of some sort of law of physics that were being expressed here, it should be reliably observed and able to be reliably measured, but it only seems to occur sometimes. So it's something that we don't properly understand, and we can't accept it as, we can't we can't we cannot reject the possibility that it is noise-induced, that there is some error in experimental setups that is producing this. We need to better understand what is causing these signals, and while it may be something physical, the fact that it isn't always observed suggests again that there is some form of noise involved here. Some form of experimental error. Until that possibility has been rejected, we do not accept it as mainstream science or an established physical phenomenon. And while that may upset you, that's how science works, because our main goal is to reject error, reject experimental error, and our main goal is to make sure that we do not get trapped in various forms of intellectual bias.
Who even determines what is or isn't science?
Your guys' entire ad hoc at that rescue device to try to discredit the work of Dayton Miller and all the other people who have measured the same things he has is laughable. You try to claim that the entire effect that was measured, which does not appear when being plotted against solar time at all, but does appear perfectly when plotted against sidereal time, trying to claim that that is induced by temperature fluctuations when temperature was specifically controlled for and filtered out as a source cause of the effect is hilarious. You literally have the authors of the study stating on paper that they control for temperature, and then you say, oh, well, it must have been temperature that did it. And even if, the beauty of it is, even if that were somehow true, that they didn't control for temperature and temperature was contaminating the readings, there is no possible way that random error induced by temperature fluctuation over years and years and years would produce a smooth sinusoidal curve that is correlated perfectly with sidereal time. That is hilarious. And anyone with a shred of intellectual honesty would acknowledge that and be like, oh, that's really weird. I wonder where these readings could have come from. Temperature's definitely not it. That's hilarious. And then with stuff like Ruyong Wong, once again, you can't even begin to touch it because the only attempted explanation that even exists for it in the mainstream paradigm is a thought experiment that's not even directly applicable because it's actually a direct refutation of your model. But since it's published in a peer-reviewed journal, you can't use your usual line of attacks on it, so you just have to come up with either a way to not address it or someone comes up with a thought experiment. Not dealing with the actual measurements.
So there are multiple points being raised here. A sinusoidal signal in sidereal time is another way of saying that the effect is seasonal, that the effect depends on the season that you are in. That's what a sinusoidal effect in sidereal time is. And to claim that that's the nature of the signal. The signal is seasonally dependent. It depends what season you're in, but it has nothing to do with temperature. That's insane. And so and moving on to Ruyong Wong, this gets back to the definition of the subject of individual irrationality versus scientific process. The Ruyong Wong has published multiple papers, and well, actually, he's only published the one. The other one was a meeting proceeding, right?
You were correct. He's published a lot.
It was an abstract, but it is not accepted. Of the explanation for what he observes is theoretical. There is a theoretical explanation for what's going on, and it destroys his argument. And I've talked to multiple theoreticians about this. And they point out the error in his experimental setup. So that's why this paper is not seen. That's why this paper is not seen as overturning relativity. And you just because tell you what. which theoreticians
Tell
I
us
spoke
why.
to.
Tell us why his experimental setup was wrong, and how there's a theoretical explanation for him measuring linear motion directly proportional in the first order and not the second order to velocity.
Okay.
Like the velocity and
I
friendships are
don't
first
know
order
the
proportional to each
explanation.
other. You
I've
don't know
spoken to-
it.
No, I don't know it. But the fact that I don't know it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, does
So
it?
you're invoking something you don't understand to try to argue against me when I brought forth the thing you don't understand as evidence?
I am invoking the opinion of scientists whose impressions have been validated by the scientific community. So I am invoking people with expertise that I don't have, whose expertise has been attested by other people who are subject matter experts, and they have looked at this problem and they have been able to explain Ryu Yong Wong's result. I don't need to be able to explain how my computer works in order to know that my computer works. I don't need to explain how brain surgery works in order for brain surgery to work.
Yeah, so I do actually know what they say.
I'm still in the middle of.
I
I'm
can help
still in
you
the
out.
middle of talking, sir, and I'm not. And I'm not. No, I'm absolutely uninterested in what you think is helping out. Yeah. So I don't need to actually definitely understand, to accept that this is the position of mainstream science. And until more than one person's opinion is introduced, I don't need to reject it. Until some reliable body of evidence has been introduced, and the logic of it and the validity of the experimental setup has been peer reviewed and accepted as valid.
It has been, bro. It has been.
I don't need to accept that this is Witsit, thanks for coming in and great work, Gally. You've done a great job moderating this from beginning to end.
Tony, now I need to moderate because you stepped in. I will moderate. That's fine. Tony, I was stepping in because of the amount of insults that you were just hurling at your interlocutor. That's what I was moderating for. Now, look, if you go on for 5 minutes and you're repeatedly insulting someone, you're making several points, you're tacking on extra points right when it sounds like you're done, and then you keep going, and then you keep going, where it sounds like you're done and someone chimes in, that's not them interrupting you if they stop as soon as you keep talking, but then you start insulting them, and you say, oh, I wasn't done, why are you interrupting me? So I'm not being a biased mob, but you keep insisting, please don't interrupt. I'm asking you, please, to stop insulting the person you're speaking to. If you can do that, please, thank you.
All right, he said his piece. Let's just not go into meta. Tony, you finish your point. Witsit was hot micing, so he wasn't interrupting. PIEZO, or who was going to respond to that? Let's just
so it's just this guy. It's funny, right? Once I don't need to keep repeating this. It needs to be like an established rule anytime PhDTony debates anybody that he's not allowed to just go on forever and ever about appeal to consensus and majority. Like, everybody knows your position. If every single time you give a response about anything, you always repeat that, you are wasting everyone's time. It is definitionally sophistry. So stop it. We know for the 100th time we know. Now, I don't accept your premise based on this fallacious reasoning, but even within your fallacious framework, Ryu Wong's work has been peer-reviewed and accepted in a prestigious physics journal. And when you read the work, you actually find out that this work was funded and the equipment was granted and given and done through the Naval Research Laboratory, and he had assistance from the literal inventor of fiber optic gyroscopes himself. So for you to make an appeal to authority fallacy in this particular case is dog crap, bro. It's trash. That is a horrible argument. Now, to the actual science involved, which you are attempting to handwave dismiss, you claim that you don't know what the arguments are. You simply know that there are scientists who have brought forth arguments, and since the entire consensus of the scientific community hasn't been swayed, then you're not going to be swayed. You are literally giving up and ceding your intellectual agency to other people. I do not do that. The only arguments that have been brought forth for his work are the same types of arguments that were brought forth back in like the 1930s and 40s to attempt to handwave Sagnac. But the problem is, especially in this particular case, is they invent once again, we talked about earlier how measurements don't care about coordinate system preference because measurements deal with real physical effects. They don't care about mental convention of humans. They invent fictitious reference frames in which a center axis of rotation is centered about the body, on the body, about which rotation is happening around it, and they convert all the measurements and make them to be made with respect to that center axis of rotation. And then they say, look, when you compare the rim to the center, of course you measure an acceleration and a motion because it's constantly changing its position with respect to the center. In reality, in these devices, the real measurement is not taking place in that way. The emitters and detectors are at the same place at all points in time. They are around a rim and they're equidistant from one another and never move with respect to one another. It does not serve at all as a real physical explanation whatsoever. It basically says, hey, if we were to imagine a universe where we take our detection device and we move the detection device to a place it's not actually in reality, and then we pretend that it was measured as if it was in a different place, which is the center, and we took all the measurements with respect to the center, then we can see how it would measure this. But that's not what happens in these real experiments. It's not measured with respect to those places they make up. It's measured with respect to where it actually is. And in that framework, you have no relativistic way whatsoever to explain how you can get a constant velocity of linear motion causing a velocity-dependent friend shift in a device. Because if Ruyong Wong's device measures a velocity-dependent friend shift with constant linear velocity, then Michelson-Morley would have had to measure the same effect for Earth. And the fact that it didn't only merely indicates that the Earth was not moving, because in Ruyong Wong's device, when the device is moving, it does measure it.
Okay, for starters, are you now asserting that all peer-reviewed published papers are correct?
Do you see what he does? Like, I'm pretty sure everyone in the audience is completely frustrated with what you just did. Like, this is so intellectually dishonest.
No, you started your argument.
Yeah, just tactics.
You started your argument by saying Ruyong Wong's paper was peer-reviewed and in a reputable journal. You said high prestige journal, which I dispute. It's in a generally reputable journal. Therefore, my claim that it could be wrong is nonsense.
He didn't say that. That's a lie.
In order for that line of reasoning to be valid,
you're just
No, I am pointing out.
You're arguing against a ghost. These are not the things I said.
Sally, now he is just interrupting.
Okay, moderation,
Right?
moderation,
Yeah,
moderation,
he's just
moderation,
talking over
Tony,
me.
moderation,
People are
moderation,
just talking over me now.
moderation,
I don't see that
moderation.
I don't see that this is valid.
Hey, Tony, moderation. Okay, when someone's saying, no, I didn't say that, straw man, then you can't just go on for 5 minutes as if you're rebutting him. Dude, you've done it. He didn't say that at all. He said, and we all heard him, he said, it doesn't matter what the consensus or authority is. I don't even accept the fallacious paradigm in which this is written within. But even within that, even within the fallacious paradigm that you keep invoking, that it's all about authority and scientists and consensus, this is a valid publication. So that argument's totally irrelevant in this instance, but that doesn't even matter anyway. This is what he said. That doesn't even matter anyway. Let's talk about the actual science and the data itself. And then you responded by saying, oh, he's saying because it's in a paper and publication, it must be true. He didn't say that. He said the opposite of that.
Okay. No, that's my point. My point is that just because not all papers that make it past peer review are correct, right? I don't have to accept that Ruyong Wong's analysis is correct just because it appeared in a peer-reviewed paper. I will accept that it is correct when it has been duplicated and replicated. Has this occurred?
Yes. Toyota's done it with Mach-Zehnder interferometers. Toyota R&D Labs. I don't remember what year. You could pull it up, bro. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it was 2012, maybe. It may be 2008, 2012, somewhere in there. Toyota R&D Labs did it with a Mach-Zehnder interferometer. Same type of setup.
Please provide the reference.
Okay, let me ask you this. If I show you that Toyota has demonstrated that using a Mach-Zehnder interferometer, you can measure linear velocity, just like Ruyong Wong was able to measure linear velocity, is it going to matter? Are you going to concede and be like, you're right, the Earth's not moving, linear velocity, proportional phase friend shift? Is that what's going to happen?
No.
Okay, so then why would I waste my time?
It's just a tactic, Tony.
Because you need to build a body of evidence. So one data point is a data point. 2 data points are 2 data points. And how many data points do we need in order to get from an anomalous result to something that is accepted science? I don't know the answer to that, but it's something more than 2, isn't it?
Bro, these research grants that Ruyong Wong and his colleagues did through the U.S. Naval Research Laboratories, they actually did multiple of them back-to-back, multiple years in a row. And because the results were so groundbreaking the first year that it happened, the U.S. Naval Research Lab invited them back again to do it the next year and repeat it in an even better experimental setup, which is the second one that they did, which is the one that you're familiar with, the famous one from 2004 called the Generalized Sagnac effect. That's actually the second set of experiments that they did. So it's happened multiple times already through the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, Ruyong Wong and his colleagues, and the inventor of fiber optic gyroscopy. If you're not going to accept the results, if you're going to just hand wave them away, then you might as well not debate anyone on any topic at any point in time because you're completely dishonest intellectually.
No. There are 2 possible explanations.
I'm going to rest right there, bro. Unless you're going to engage with the actual science, with the actual measurements. If you're not going to engage with the measurements in the experiment, if you're just going to find a way to hand wave it away and not deal with it, I'm not going to talk to you because you're extremely dishonest. Deal with the science or don't talk.
Okay. I am dealing with the science. That somebody gets a repeatable signal can indicate one of 2 things. Either they are measuring something that is real, or there is an error in their experimental or theoretical setup. Either one of those things can be true. Just because they get a repeatable signal does not mean A, that their theory was correct, and B, that their experimental setup was correct. So you need to check each of those 2 individual components, and you need to validate that there has been no theoretical error and that there has been no experimental error before you accept the repeatable result as having the significance that the author suggests. Is that not valid scientific procedure?
But that's what happened when they submitted it to the Physical Review Letters Journal and they peer-reviewed it and accepted it. They went through exactly the process you're talking about.
What's the difference between a letter? So why did not?
They're just all tactics.
So do you know the difference between a journal and other journals?
Dude,
No. Do you know the difference technically?
Okay, Tony. He said if you're not going to engage with the actual science and the measurements themselves, then he doesn't want to engage with you anymore, and then you repeatedly just try to deflect away with tactics again.
No,
so are you basically, Tony, let me ask you this question so I can progress. Here's the question. Assuming that it was a valid measurement and that it was done, let's say hypothetically, it was done 1,000 more times by 1,000 people and everyone independently critiqued it and there's no flaws in the experiment, the measurement's legit. Can you engage from that hypothetical forward, please?
No, because I'm not wasting my time engaging with something that isn't true.
Well,
okay, so then...
Yep.
If we assume that all of relativity is wrong and we assume that all of science is wrong, please progress from that point. No, it's a pointless discussion.
You've already made the foregone conclusion. You know that this test couldn't be correct. The measurements can't be correct, even though you don't understand it, can't engage with it. And if we gave you $1,000 right now, you couldn't even accurately steel man what PIEZO just explained to you. So you're literally just using in the room. And it's kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying to listen to because we would like to hear you do have some type of academic background. We would like to hear a productive, intellectually stimulating conversation where you engage with the actual points. Many people did actually look at his paper, at his tests, and they tried to critique it. Not one of them said, oh, this is just such a stupid, easily dismissed test that there's a fundamental error in it. No, they tried to explain it within the framework of relativity and try to come up with explanations for the measurements. If it was just such a laughable, easily dismissed mistake, then they would have pointed that out. But none of them did that. They tried to explain it, right? But you're not even engaging with it. PIEZO's spending all this time in good faith to lay out the specifics of the argument, and all you're focused on is a way to just throw it away so you don't even have to engage with it. It's just dishonesty.
No, so you guys are not.
Can you just engage with it, bro? Like yes or no? I told you I don't want to discuss anymore if you're not going to do it.
Whose question am I answering?
Are you going to engage with the paper's measurements or not?
I will try, but I want to make a point first. You guys are looking at physical review letters, and you are saying this is a highly prestigious journal, to some extent, but these are letters. So these are very short descriptions of results. The editorial standards that are applied to them are very different from what would be applied in Nature, for instance, or in Science, or in more significant physical journals. So this is important when you are interpreting what's going on and the degree of not long enough to listen to reality. Yes, physical. You
are not familiar with the argument, that you are not prepared to engage with the specificity that he has provided, you can't rebut it, you can't stillman it, you cannot argue against it, which is why 10 consecutive responses have been strictly limited to attempts to dismiss it outright. And if you want to prove me wrong, go ahead.
Not what I am saying, you cretinous liar.
All right, then go ahead and engage with the measurements. Deal with the measurements. Prove him wrong. Deal with the measurements, bro.
What paper is it?
It's called Generalized Sagnac Effect. Right?
Gotcha.
Okay.
I'm gonna go Greg.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing, which would be a lot easier. All I wanted to do in ab initio is make sure that everybody in the conversation fully appreciates that.
In refusing to engage with the evidence that disproves your worldview.
No, I'm not. I am trying to introduce more evidence. I'm trying to introduce more evidence and more refinement in your ability to assess particular papers.
Red herring.
Go ahead.
That's a red herring.
Spout whatever nonsense you want to say.
Okay, red herring. So can you actually respond to his point?
I don't think he's enough time to respond yet.
Tony, can you even stillman his point?
His point was that I'm conceding.
No, can you even stillman the whole argument he broke down about the actual tests and measurements themselves and the ramifications or implications of them? Can you even stillman the argument?
The stillman of the argument is that there is a that there is a signal detected in the fiber optic loop that cannot be explained by rotation, and that therefore infers a detection of linear velocity. The exact details are exactly what I am trying to look up now. Though looking at his experimental setup, that's problematic.
Okay, so you're trying to. So why would you not say, I'm not familiar with all of it, I need to look into it, instead of acting like you can tell based on how it was published that it's really not valid?
That's not what I said at all. That's not what I was trying to assert. Witsit?
So you can't rebut his argument, though. You're not familiar enough with it to actually rebut the specificity of the fictitious reference frames that were invoked to try to explain it relativistically. You're not familiar enough with it to actually engage with it, right?
I am. So these frames.
Basics about publications, which is what you do every time. You actually engage with the point. He asked you to do that like 5 or 6 times. The only reason I even jumped in, I'm actually busy. It's just like you just refuse to engage with it. And if you needed some time to look at the papers, to be more familiar with it, that would have been an honest response. But instead, you just kept trying to lecture about public. I mean, no one asked for this breakdown of how papers work. It's totally irrelevant. It's a red herring. And of course, the other person's going to get frustrated. Of course, the room's going to get frustrated because we cleared the floor for you to ostensibly interact one-on-one and have a good faith debate.
So if you're going to ask me if there's a relativistic effect taking place when my entire point is I don't accept relativity, that would be kind of absurd.
Okay, so you're hand waving dismiss.
No, that's specifically not what I'm doing. I'm acknowledging that there is a difference in the travel time around the loop. I'm just saying it's not a discontinuity because I don't believe time discontinuities exist in reality. Differentials do. Discontinuity would imply that time changed, relativistically speaking.
And what does a time differential imply?
It means that the amount of time it takes a signal to go clockwise versus counterclockwise is different.
Right. Okay. So you are, but surely they spend. Why would that be the case?
When the device is moving, the time differential is directly proportional to the velocity with which the device is moving. It's actually a first-order proportionality. It traces a linear plot on the graph.
What causes that?
Because the device is moving through a field of ether, and as it moves through a field of ether, the device is actually measuring its motion relative to the ether field, which is absolute space. So with respect to absolute space, the device is measuring its own motion.
Which device are we talking about?
We're talking about there is a paper, Taylor, called Generalized Sagnac Effect. by a guy by the name of Ryu Yong Wong and colleagues. That is in Physical Review Letters. It was published in 2004. Does that give you enough?
No, yeah, I was just trying to catch up the audience on which device, but yeah, you can respond to his point or whatever.
Okay. But you accept that the light signals in this experiment spend as much time moving in one direction as they do in the other, right? I mean,
no, they specifically spend different amounts of time. That's the whole point of the experiment. That's what the reading is. The reading shows that if I plug in the Sagnac formula, if I take the Sagnac effective formula and I plug in the time differential from the device, it will correctly predict the velocity that the device is moving with linearly.
Yeah, but you are moving the device. You're moving the receiver towards or away from the emitter. So
in a linear path, there's no rotation, so you can't invoke the traditional explanation for Sagnac, which says, well, special relativity doesn't treat rotating systems as inertial, because with linear motion, specifically not even acceleration, just constant linear velocity, which has no acceleration, just moving in a straight line, there's no change in the distance between the emitter and detector, but you can measure any finite segment within that loop and measure the linear motion's velocity. And it's directly proportional in the first order to the French shift.
The Sagnac effect doesn't rely on accelerations. The Sagnac effect relies on velocity. The Sagnac effect relies on the fact that one receiver is moving towards the emitter and the other receiver is moving away from the emitter with a given velocity. That's how the Sagnac effect is derived. This analysis that I'm using is explicitly from the Sagnac effect, treating it as a one-dimensional coordinate system.
No, the Sagnac effect is velocity.
You can say no. I've read relativistic analyses of the Sagnac effect that do.
You don't even know which part I'm disagreeing with yet.
And I don't care because I've read this from relativistic experts. So I don't care what your objection is. You saying no, that isn't true. You haven't read the analysis that I've read. So I don't see how you're coming up with an objection to it.
Well, if you'd let me speak, then you would know why. So the reason I said no is because you said that the Sagnac effect is caused by one detector moving towards the emitter and another detector moving away from the emitter. That's not how that works. In the Sagnac effect, there's one emitter and one detector, and they are screwed into a table. They're fixed around the rim of a table, and the entire table rotates. And the distance between the emitter and detector never changes. The detector's never moving towards or away from the emitter. They're always equidistant from one another in both directions.
That's not true because of the rotational motion. One of them is moved closer towards the emitter, and the other one is moved away from it.
Not towards the emitter, towards the place where the signal originated, because the emitter moves away from where the signal originated as well during the travel time of the light.
Then that changes the time of flight of the photon. Right?
Okay, now you just acknowledged absolute space. Thank you for playing.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did, bro. GG.
I didn't. You just asserting that doesn't make any sense.
Acknowledged. Hold on, I'll explain why. You acknowledged that since it's about the place where the signal was emitted from, because the emitter itself is also moving away from that place. Since it's about the detector moving towards or away the place where the signal was emitted from, we do not treat the signal of the light at the moment it was fired. We do not treat space itself in the coordinate frame in which that pulse was emitted as separated from the emitter. Once you do that, you're getting into classical mechanics, C plus or minus V. That's exactly how Galilean relativity works. That's Newtonian. You can't do that. That's not relativity.
That's absolute nonsense. You can. So all you're doing is calculating the distance that the receiver traveled during the time of flight of the photon.
Okay, with respect to what? Distance with respect to what? Distance is measured between 2 points. What are the 2 points?
Well, its initial position at the point where the emission occurred.
So the lab frame, right?
Yes, the lab frame. Let's use the
Okay,
lab frame.
so but wait, motion's relative, right?
But you will get identical results, and this is something that you don't understand about relativity. You can do it in whatever reference frame you want, right? Whichever reference frame you want, you can do this, and you will get the same result.
Okay, so what's the speed of light then? And if it's differential based on going around, what's the speed of light measured aboard the table and measured in the lab frame? Are they different?
No.
Oh, well, now you're caught, bros. GG, thanks for playing. So here's why you're wrong. You just stated that it would be about the initial point when the signal was emitted, which in this case, we would just measure in the lab frame. So in the lab frame, the detector moves either towards or away from the point where the signal was emitted. I agree, right? So therefore, the speed of light is constant in the lab frame, right? In either direction, it's like constant in that preferred inertial frame, which is the lab frame. But as soon as you switch to the table, on board the table, the only way you're actually able to correctly predict the friend shift from the table is using C plus or minus V, where V is the velocity of the table that's rotating. That's the only way you can predict the friend shift. That's actually how Sagnac derived it in the first place. Hold on, I'm almost done. That's actually how Sagnac derived it in the first place, is he used C plus or minus V, and that's what correctly predicts the friend shift. And the only way that was able to be co-opted in relativity is they said that it's rotation, and any rotating system is not truly an inertial frame, so it doesn't break the special relativity because it's not an inertial frame, and special relativity deals with inertial frames. But in Ruyong Wong, he demonstrated you can use the same Sagnac effect, use the Sagnac formula, and get the same exact C plus or minus V relationship for the friend shift, because you just use C plus or minus V of the conveyor belt or the parallelogram form. And it's not a rotating system, so it definitionally is an inertial frame. It still happens the same exact way as it did on Sagnac's table.
Well, yeah, the Sagnac effect.
So stop interjecting, stop trying to save him, stop trying to rescue him, let Tony talk.
We need a point of clarification at some point, because I'm virtually certain the vast majority of the listeners are lost in this big cloud of wisdom spoken over the past half hour. So what's the defined proposition being disputed right now? So what's the defined proposition being disputed right now?
The Ruyong Wong's experiment disproves Tony's position.
And Tony's position is what? Define his position.
His position is that number one, special relativity is true, and that number two, acceleration is absolute, but velocity is not.
Now, define special relativity. What is it?
Einstein's 1905 paper defines it.
Hold on, was Tony going to respond?
1922 also.
Yeah, like Tony. Yeah, it's.
So
1922 also though, right? Because I have the quote.
So to answer this, it sounds like you've never read a relativity textbook, because the C plus V and the C minus V terms in the table reference frame come from the motion of the receiver during the time of flight of the photon. They have nothing to do with adding velocities together. It's it's the distance that the receiver has traveled during the time of flight of the photon. That's all those C plus V and C minus V terms represent. They do not represent changes to the speed of light.
Okay, but the speed of light is supposed to be the same in all inertial frames. So if you have an inertial frame where it's C, and you're just converting the plus or minus V into a distance change so that C can stay the same, that's one thing. But if you then switch to a different inertial frame and you can't do that because the distance never changes, the only thing you have left is to add C plus or minus V. And you can't have C plus or minus V because it breaks the laws of relativity. Also, furthermore, a third point is that if you decouple the signal from the emitter that emitted it, you're also breaking relativity, because Einstein also in his 1900 paper defines his theory, and he says that you're not allowed to assign velocity vectors to a point in space where electromagnetic processes once took place, meaning you can't just create a coordinate system around the point of emission separate from the emitter.
I don't accept that you are accurately summarizing what Einstein said.
Okay, go read his paper, bro.
I don't
need you to accept it, bro. It's the truth. So,
okay. Well, your irrationality has been repeatedly demonstrated during this discussion, so thank you. But the other,
you can't resist ad homing, can you?
It's not an ad hom. Either someone is irrational or they are not. And this and
bro. I don't care about the guy, please.
And the fact that you accept some evidence from some sources and then you use the same validation to prop up other sources. You're not painting a picture of impartiality here.
So what's the explanation for Ruyong Wong?
Well, it would be the time discontinuity introduced in these optical loops.
By the motion of the device?
No.
Oh, well then why is it proportional to the motion of the device?
I'll have to get back to you on that. But Yeah,
for playing, bro. All right, bro. Yep, we'll see you next time.
Okay. So you're
Go ahead and tell me what space is.
I already told you once, but I shall tell you again. Space is the boundaryless three-dimensional expanse in which objects and events have relative positions and directions.
Okay. Is it a concrete entity?
No.
Is it an abstract entity?
Sorry, I'll take that back. Yes, space is a concrete entity.
So, okay. What's the color of space?
Do all concrete entities have colors?
Okay, what's the texture of space?
Do all concrete objects have textures?
Okay, what's the scent of space?
Do all concrete objects have scents?
Okay, what state of matter is space? Solid, liquid, or gas?
Space is not composed of matter.
But you said it was
I think
concrete.
he's looking for an
Yes, concrete.
attribute. What's the attribute? An attribute.
We're still at the point where you got to give me some property that is distinctive of material entities, right? Doesn't have any color, doesn't have any scent, doesn't have any taste, no audible qualities, no textile quality, not in any phase of matter, nothing.
In philosophy, concrete refers to things that exist in space and time. By definition, space exists in space.
Excuse me? Space exists in space?
Yes.
That's a first.
You hold it right there. I'll get back to this point. Y'all continue on. I'll get back here. Give me a few minutes.
That's a first for me, bro.
Yeah, let that sink in.
Space exists in space. So
Mine is conversation about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So hang on. You can't.
Witsit was talking. I was telling him to go ahead.
Sorry. You can't concede. In the definition of concrete, you are conceding the existence of space. You can't then turn around and say space doesn't exist. It's an abstraction.
Okay, man. You just said space exists in space, my guy. Chill. Take a breather. So to like an expedited summary of the whole entire conversation and the point is that back in the day, to try to get away from the issue that the Sandneck fringe shift did match the prediction within 98% of the predicted value using like the sidereal rotation. They're like, oh, wait, we are detecting it because they got out of MMX by saying, oh, look, relativity reference frames, you can't detect the motion. You detected the rotational motion of sidereal rotation with the Sandneck effect. So to get out of that, they're like, oh, well, technically it's not an inertial frame and relativity only deals with inertial frames, so you can detect rotational motion. That was the way they got out of it, to have their cake and eat it too, right? And then if you fast forward, now what? If you get a phase shift that the predicted phase shift matches the actual, the prediction of the linear velocity proportionate to linear velocity, it's detecting the linear velocity, which is specifically what relativity's explanation is for why you can't detect the orbit, right? They say, oh, well, Earth's orbit is actually a free fall in a linear path, so therefore you can't detect that motion because of the reference frame. So if you're detecting linear velocity with interferometry, now you have a major issue with relativity's initial explanation to try to hand-wave dismiss the fact that Michelson-Morley did not detect the orbit. So now they've trapped themselves within their own explanation of the Sandneck effect and how you can detect rotation but cannot detect the orbit, right? Because if you are able to detect linear velocity with interferometry, now we go back to MMX, and that would mean that you would have to have got a fringe shift based on the 30 kilometer per second assumed orbit, which they did not get. Therefore, the orbital claim is debunked even within their own paradigm.
Yes, thank you for your complete mischaracterization, and you can tell that it's a mischaracterization because of the editorial content that was snuck in at almost every sentence. Yu Yong Wang's results have not been replicated. The articles cite his papers for some reason. PRL is giving me brief apparently. But or mind
explained that with a relativistic application to the orbit, it is claimed that the Earth's orbit is in a free fall, thus a linear velocity, thus isn't detected and Michelson Morley due to the relative reference frame, but that you can detect based on the predictive fringe shift accurately within a rotational system because relativity only adheres to
velocity.
Oh, wow.
One more
You're
plea.
cutting
Can
out
I
while
just
you're
sneak
interrupting.
one?
You're cutting out while you're interrupting.
that free fall
Everyone's
is
freaking
linear
out.
velocity.
Everyone's
Please
freaking out.
defend
They're
that
freaking out.
statement.
They're freaking out. They're freaking out. Okay, so they claimed that they weren't expected to detect the orbit with MMX because of the relativistic update, but that they were okay with detecting the fringe shift based on the rotational period, specifically the sidereal rotation. That's what they use to get the predictive fringe shifts, which the results match within 98% accuracy every single time. Okay, so they had to explain, wait, how does the same type of principle with the interferometer detect the rotation but not the orbit? So they said, oh, well, because the rotational reference frames are different. Rotational motion is different. You can detect it. So now if we fast forward to detecting the linear velocity, we have an issue. That's the point. If you want to engage with that, engage with that. If not, fall back.
So what you said was factual gibberish, right? You claimed that free fall is linear velocity. That's not true. So I don't understand why people listen to you when you make such fundamental factual errors in your statements, in your preambles. The reason we don't, the reason that we do not expect to see the rotational effect is because it is very much smaller than the diurnal rotational effects. Right.
Okay, so just to clarify
and I will point out that there are changes. And I will point out that there are changes in Earth's rotational axis and in its speed of rotation that will dwarf any attempts to isolate the orbital effect. So you're
okay, dude. Okay. None of that engaged with my point again. Okay, and let's just show what clearly just happened. Was PIEZO tried to go back and forth with you with the specifics. You were invited to do so about 10 consecutive times. You tried to just lecture us about papers and how it wasn't valid enough to even engage with. Then you said you'd have to look into it. When you said you'd have to look into it, you said you would go, you weren't familiar with the paper, that you would have to go look into it and then that maybe discuss it later. Okay, so then Gregory just asked, okay, this conversation's a little bit high level. Can we get a simplified explanation for the room? Okay, then he started getting into the conversation with you, stepped away. All I did was paraphrase so that the rest of the room could digest it quickly. And then all of a sudden, but you were equipped to actually debate and refute the paper after you admitted you weren't 5 minutes ago. And now all of a sudden, both of the other people feel the need to clip me and try to argue with the point. Yet PIEZO was sitting here ready to go through the specifics and no one wanted to engage. I was only recapping for the room to understand it.
What about
you were
Tony
lying about what happened, Witsit, and you made factual errors in doing so.
Tony, what about what you said
you were trying to recap the history of the scientific literature up to now, which was just a series of unsubstantiated lies about people's motivations, and then you got basic fact patterns about linear velocity and free fall wrong, and then you attributed our inability to detect our annual orbit to some other reason than that effect is much smaller. So they're about 10,000 times smaller.
Okay, is Tony wrong in saying that Witsit is wrong about the linear velocity? Why are we skipping over that?
He's laughably wrong. And all you have to do to prove it is go read Einstein himself, Special and General Relativity, where he makes the distinction between rotational motion and then the rotation of the Earth around the sun. And in fact, subsequent publications of that book or paper, whatever you want to call it, then actually changes it to the word revolution to distinguish it from another rotational motion. He explains it in that paper that the Earth is supposedly just free falling. And since we're on the Earth, we're in its reference frame. It's free falling in a linear path. Therefore, we don't detect the motion of the Earth around the sun while we are on the Earth. But if we were to say beyond the sun, we would be able to detect the orbital motion. Einstein himself said that in his own writing. And then Tony came along to say that that's not true.
And when did he say the velocity was linear?
He said that we're moving. He said that the motion is is it a linear path? Are we moving in a linear path?
No.
The Earth isn't free falling?
Yes, it is free falling, but that's straight in space time. And so you're invoking the curvature of space time, but that's not. But that the entire fact that space curves is not a straight line, right? You don't have straight lines in curved surfaces. You don't have straight lines in curved surfaces.
Whoa. Okay. Have you ever read Special and General Relativity by Einstein?
Yes, I have.
Okay, what did he say about this?
About the curve. You'll have to be more specific. They're long papers. Where in
About the
this
stuff
are you?
that you're claiming I'm wrong about. What did he say about it?
He didn't say that Earth travels in linear. Earth's motion. He didn't say that.
You cut out. Say it again.
He didn't say that Earth's motion is linear.
Okay, what Einstein explained in his paper is that from the reference frame of the Earth, we're free falling in what effectively amounts to a linear path within our reference frame. And it's based on the curve. Do not scream. It doesn't make you right. Yes, it's based on. Stop. Yes, it's based on the alleged curvature of space and time. So the simple, and by the way, we've had tons of people come in here that do understand this and very quickly agree with this. The simple explanation from your paradigm is that, well, the Earth is rotating and going in a straight path. It's based on the reference frame. And if you actually read where Einstein discusses this, you claim you did, then can you explain when he is discussing MMX and then he starts to talk about the orbit of the Earth, explain how he describes that? Go ahead.
He says that the orbital path is an inertial reference frame, and we're not going to be able to detect that acceleration. I constantly make that mistake. But let's rewind back to the fantastic word salad that you skated across at high speed.
Word salad.
An effectively linear velocity. Please,
what?
Please, you said that Earth. You said that Einstein claims that Earth is orbiting the Sun at an effectively linear velocity. Please cite where Einstein said that. Yes, you did.
I did not say
that. You used those exact words, Witsit.
No, he didn't.
No, I didn't.
Yes, he did.
Einstein said that we're moving at effectively a linear velocity.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think I said that. But if I said that, then I'm not attributing a quote to him. Okay, so if you want to engage with the point when I'm saying it's effectively a linear velocity, then you can do that. You seem to be really, really confident that you're about to prove me wrong here. So let's just talk about it step by step. Is the Earth in your paradigm in a free fall?
Yes.
Okay, is that a straight path?
No.
Oh, so a free fall is not a straight path.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and enlighten us.
So it is following a geodesic in space-time, and a geodesic in space-time is the straightest possible path following the curvature of the surface. But that does not make the geodesic straight.
Okay, from the reference frame of Earth...
A straight line is straight. A geodesic is as close to a straight line as you can get following the curvature.
I know.
Yes, then saying that it is straight is inaccurate, is it not?
No, because what you're doing is conflating the Earth's reference frame to the reference frame outside of the Earth. Dun, dun, dun. So from the Earth, which is what I said, from the Earth, from the reference frame of the Earth, the claim is within relativity, we cannot detect the orbital motion because when we're in the reference frame of the Earth, what the motion amounts to for us within this reference frame is a free fall through a linear path. Once we leave this reference frame, we know it's actually just a geodesic path, and it's the fastest point from A to B within the curvature of space-time. And if you went to, say, the reference frame of the Sun, you would see that curvature and be able to detect the motion. But since you're on the Earth, locally, within this reference frame, that it's basically like you can only, in really simple terms, you can only experience a little minute portion of the motion at any given time within the geodesic path, which amounts to anything that you can detect being synonymous, indistinguishable from a linear motion. And if you don't believe that, then you got a major problem with MMX. You're about to just completely destroy your whole worldview if you don't accept that premise.
To say that instantaneously, over an infinitesimal time change, that the motion is effectively linear is very different from motion suggests that it is moving in a straight line, and now you're changing it to a sort of a derivative, an instantaneous linear velocity, which is obviously acceptable. But when you say linear motion, you are not making an instantaneous claim. You are effectively claiming that the elliptical orbit around the sun is linear, and that is demonstrably true.
That's not what I said.
When you say, then you need to be more careful in how you express.
You just don't understand it. Your own paradigm claims it's going straight and curved.
If you want to say instantaneous linear velocity, you need to say instant linear velocity, because you didn't say that. You said linear motion, which is motion along a line, and that is not what the Earth experiences.
Oh, okay, cite it, because I'll cite Einstein. Assume that's not driving, because what he explains is that this is the still man of your position, but in really simple terms. When you say, does the Earth move in a curved path? It's yes and no. It's yes and no.
Okay.
Yes. What was the point of that? Okay. So
he left.
I think he dropped out of the VC. I don't know if he lost connection or.
He said you're driving high and then left.
Oh, is that bad? Okay. Well, anyway, this is an actual stillman, right? And if you guys have ever heard the back and forth we have with like other people that are familiar with relativity, they'll easily concede this, right? Because this was like the big gotcha we tried to get them with. Like, wait, is the Earth not moving in a curved path? Because we're like Michelson-Morley should detect it, right? If you're claiming that it can detect motion on a curved path, like with the Sagnac effect, then if we're moving in a curved path, then we should be able to detect it on the Earth, right? So does the Earth move in a curved path around the sun? And they would say yes and no. It moves in both a curved and not curved path. By the way, not curved means straight or linear, okay? It moves in both a curved and not curved path. It depends on which reference frame you're talking about. And if you're talking about the reference frame of the Earth, it effectively amounts to just a linear path. But if you go to the other reference frame, it's a curved path. And this is why when we're on the Earth, we can't detect the motion, because you can only detect the motion if it's on a curved path. That's an accurate representation of the current paradigm of the globe Earth model.
Bro, he said in
that
chat.
Argument was used against me years ago. Exactly that. When you would tell him, look, it's going around, right? So we can detect it, right? It's curve linear motion. Oh no. It's falling and traveling in a straight line. Exactly that argument was used years ago. So yeah.
He said in text
He's
chat.
He's gonna say it's dangerous or something. Yeah, but it's just because he can't engage with his points, because he's wrong. He's just wrong. So whatever, rain check, and he still can't engage with his point. This is just a fact. Dude, this is why PIEZO's argument is so damning. This is why the test is so damning. This is why he's bringing it up. Because that's the way they got out of the issue, right? They're like, wait. Yeah, well, we can detect the curved motion, like the rotational motion, is because it's a curved path. That's the explanation. You can detect the rotational motion, it's a curved path. So it's not inertial, right? But on the Earth, even though the Earth's orbit is a curved path, when you're on the Earth, it's not. Because you're basically free falling in a straight line. But when you zoom all the way out and you take the entirety of the curvature of space-time, you have to get outside of the Earth to get the displacement of the mass of the Earth to give you the curvature of the space-time around the Earth, right? Like if you envision dropping the bowling ball on the blankets like they show you, that's what they claim that gravity is. So in order to see the curvature of the space and time around the Earth, the bowling ball on the blanket, you're going to have to zoom out of the Earth. You're going to have to get off the Earth, out of the Earth's reference frame. If you were on that bowling ball and you dropped it, if you were a little ant on the bowling ball and you dropped it into the blanket, you're just going to be going down. But if you zoom all the way out, there's going to be curvature of space and time around you. This applies to the sun as well. So when you're on the Earth, it's just a linear motion. And that's why I said effectively amounts to. That's just a simple way of saying it's relative to reference frames. Yeah, we get it's an absolutely absurd position. Saying effectively linear motion is absurd. That's the implications of relativity, which is intrinsically absurd. But anyway, so I hope everyone understands that with the blanket. It's important. That was the way they got out of the whole thing. This is why we are so obsessed with MMX. And then this test basically brings us all the way back. Just like quantum mechanics has brought us all the way back. Everything's always going to bring us back to MMX, because that's when we actually discovered irrefutably the Earth is not moving around the sun. So they said, it's moving in a linear path. That's why you can't detect it from the reference frame of the Earth. If you went all the way to the sun, you would be able to see that the Earth is moving in a curved path, right? But you'd have to be all the way outside the reference frame of the Earth. From the Earth reference frame, you're at any given moment, you're just free falling straight. You're never going to be able to detect it.
Relativity was the ad hoc for Michelson-Morley.
So then they did the Sagnac, and you do detect it, right? They use the same exact equation, the velocity of Earth, the velocity of the sidereal rotation, basically, the velocity of light. They use the same exact principles within interferometry to get the predicted fringe shift. And then when they did the test, they actually did detect the rotational motion within 98% accuracy every single time. So they're like, okay, wait a minute. What's going on? We're detecting rotation, but we're not detecting the orbit, which is effectively a rotation, right? The Earth is rotating around the sun. Doesn't matter if they want to say it's different, it's not different. The rotation is defined as motion around a central axis. The Earth is rotating around the sun. Okay, we call it orbit or revolution just to distinguish between the two. It's a rotational motion. So like, wait, we can't detect the rotational motion around the sun, but we're detecting this other rotational motion. So how does this work? That's at that moment in reality, what should have happened is the acceptance of what the evidence showed, which is like there is only one motion and it's rotational, it's locally rotational, and we'd have to figure that out. And we'd say, okay, well, the sky rotates and that's all that moves. There is no orbit. Instead, they wanted to have their cake and eat it too and say, oh, we can detect the rotational motion on the Earth, but we can't detect the rotational motion out in space as it goes around the sun. That's the whole thing relativity had to somehow find a way to try to make sense of. Right.
You know,
and that's what it did.
The
It said,
free falling. Yeah.
and what's hilarious with it is like, you know, when they actually get to speaking like in common sense terms, right? In common sense terms, like physically what is happening that's causing this fringe shift, everybody on both sides would acknowledge that the reason that a fringe shift is detected is because from the time that the light is emitted to the time that it's received, the device itself is moving out from underneath the light. That is what is happening. That's the physical cause of the effect. In both paradigms, they just explain it using different conventions, but that's physically what's occurring. So you say, okay, my physical device itself, it shoots out a light projectile. And while this light projectile is on its way to its destination, the device rotates out from under it. Okay. To say that that's somehow different than saying the device shifts sideways out from under it is absurd. If my device is like, you know, the size of a watch face, and I take my round watch face and I rotate it and I say, okay, the edge of my watch rotated out from under this light beam. Or if I just take my watch and I slide it forward a little bit and I say the edge of my watch translated out from under the light beam, both of those, by common sense, are going to produce the same effect. The device moved with respect to the projectile that it fired. It moved out from under the projectile. Whether that motion was a rotating motion or a translating motion, either way, there is a relative motion between the device and the light projectile, and that's causing a Sagnac effect. They had to try and co-opt it and say, oh, well, when you spin it, when you rotate it out from under the projectile, you're totally going to be able to measure that. If you just slide it on your desk out from under the projectile, you're not going to be able to measure it. That's like, I mean, that is like crazy to think about, like that they would make that claim, that people would believe that claim, that in a physical picture of what's actually causing the effect, it's just relative motion between the device and the projectile. And they had the nerve to say, like, rotating it will be measurable, but translating it won't be.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's what
it's
the pseudo
insane.
model
So
says, bro.
now we come full circle to where it's been proven that sliding it underneath it would also give you the effect. They have a major problem. This is the issue with dealing with people that are from operating like that, from within the paradigm like that, because he, in his mind, and he genuinely believes this, in my opinion, it's like, oh, well, all these other scientists haven't accepted it. Wang Wang, he hasn't gotten a Nobel Prize, so this can't be true, right? Well, no, it's irreconcilable within the current paradigm. That's why it's at a standstill. And, you know, the people that have reviewed it have just desperately tried to hand wave it, even though their explanations are laughably incorrect. It's because it's not reconcilable. This is the problem with just handing your mind over, taking your brain out of your head and just giving it to peer review. Because when there's something that they can't let go, there's a few claimed fundamental truths they cannot, sacrifice. Any evidence, no matter how valid and solid and replicated and provable it is, that goes against that assumption will just be suppressed. And that's what's happened to that evidence. It's just being suppressed. It's being ignored. It's being blacklisted. It's being swept under the rug. So, obviously you're not going to be
It
able to
goes
satisfy
against
his requests.
it goes against that dogmatic model. So forget about it. They will not hear it.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
their
like a religion,
explanations. It is like a religion, except one without a deity. It's like their position in this matter has not advanced since the 1920s. It would never have advanced had people not invented, ring lasers or the Michelson Gill Pearson wasn't really a laser, but it was still like a ring setup. If they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have been forced to take the position they did. But now that they got forced to take that position, as soon as we showed that linear motion can be detected, their entire position falls apart. And then you get people like PhDTony who admit openly that they don't understand it well enough to argue it yet and need to go look into it, but will sit here and argue with you on Discord for literally an hour and a half about why you're wrong, when they don't even have the capability to fully steelman your statement, only partially, and they don't even know at all what the alternative viewpoint to contradict it is. And they have to be told by their interlocutor what the strongest position they can take is in the field. So when their interlocutor, when their opponent actually knows more about their side than they do and educates them on it and still is able to tell them why that's wrong, and they still will argue even after acknowledging that they don't know the answer, it proves that they're just filled with dogmatism and nothing else.
Well, look, they can put their mind in a place where there can be an orbit, but also a straight line travel. So you can't argue with a person like that. Forget about it. There's no critical thinking there at all.
Am I incorrect to think that that straight line is not actually a straight line? It's a curved geodesic. It's actually a curved line. So it's not a straight line. If we were to get a straight line, we get a ruler and straight line. It's not that.
Well, what they claim is that
What's
from
free
the Earth,
falling?
it's a straight line. What they claim is from the Earth, it's a straight line, and from the reference frame of the sun, if you go out away from the Earth, it's a curved path.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Duality. Yeah.
So, GB, since you're here and Tony left, I'm talking to you, Gatebreaker. Just for my convenience, I made an acronym, initialism. Since you're here and Tony left.
I'm not an expert like any of these guys here, so I really can't answer it. I'm just here to learn as well.
All right, I mean, if you don't want to talk, that's fine. That's fine. I was just going to engage someone else since Tony left. Like whoever believes this SR doctrine, then we can resume because I can make the issue clear. If Tony had not left,
make it clear. I'd like to hear it.
If Tony had not left, asked poignant, concise questions. Right? What is your proposition? Right? Okay, you affirm this SR doctrine, special relativity. What is the doctrine? What is the proposition? All right. Vaguely and simply, he just said the relationship between space and time. I'm like, okay, this pattern of replies is familiar to me. So, what is space? And I asked the question because in my past experience, there's obviously a fundamentally different conception of what space is in their worldview, in their metaphysic. Okay. So he began answering the question, and the last answer that we left off on before another digression was space not having any empirically detectable aspects whatsoever, and space exists in space, which is obviously, to cut to the chase, a silly, implicitly self-contradictory notion. Okay, it's just asinine on its face. Right? Nothing, no entity exists within itself. That's not a meaningful proposition if you're trying to be straightforward and meaningful. Right? I don't exist in me. I am what I am. I'm not existing inside myself. Right? No material object exists in itself. That's ridiculous. But anyways, that's not even the major point. Until they get a coherent and truthful understanding of what space is, the position falls apart. It collapses. Same thing with time, right? They don't have a right to just ignore ontological facts just because they want to clutch to the doctrines that are espoused by their clerics, and they have a whole life that they've lived, that they have invested so much into over only so many years.
It's worse with time because they make time a thing, a dimension. They bring an abstract thing and they actually make it into a concrete thing.
So that's right there. They reify space, right? And they have to reify space because, like Einstein himself said on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, an ether not existing is unthinkable, right? There's only two options: either either any quantity of volume is devoid of everything whatsoever, or not. Right? Nothingness is impossible because it implies a contradiction that's logically impossible. Okay, so the only option left in the dichotomy is not, which means no volume is devoid of material concrete substance, which is to imply that there is a spatial plenum, aka the ether. So the former is logically impossible, necessarily implying that the latter is logically is necessary. It cannot be otherwise. So you cannot disprove the ether, the spatial plenum. But what they do is they deny the ether, but then espouse something that is obviously, all things considered with their words, a spatial plenum, which then results in a distinction without a difference fallacy.
Well, they don't deny it. They deny it and then they copy it.
Exactly.
They come up with quantum form. Yeah.
Exactly. They deny the spatial plenum, the ether, but then espouse their own effectively spatial plenum, and they call it space-time, which is a concession. Not only is it a reification of space and time, and not only is it a distinction without a difference, and not only is it a concession to the reality of the ether, the spatial plenum, it also implies that the Milquist and Morley experiment was a failure to detect the motion of the Earth and failed to falsify the ether. That's all relativity theory is. It's an a priori contrived doctrine. It's not an empirical fact. There's nothing that they empirically detected at all that makes their proposition refer to any material thing. It's an a priori notion they contrived as a reaction to the evidence that contradicts one of their precious presuppositions in their worldview that they don't want to let go of.
Except they use it to put satellites in orbit around other planets.
Right? See, he's saying that
Do they though?
because he's clutching to, right?
Yeah, they do.
Right? Do they though? He's saying that because he's clutching to, he's deciding to clutch to this presupposition that is, there is a ball spinning and flailing around the cosmic void, and theory of relativity, GR and SR, which drives his line of inference, his line of thinking to that, which results in a pragmatic fallacy.
I love the simplistic explanations. Time dilation. Yeah, well, satellites wouldn't work.
Right? It's very easy. It's very easy. What they do is just ignore the refutations to their erroneous metaphysical doctrines, like I just articulated, and then they point to some other practical application of actual principles of physics and things, and then implicitly or tacitly smuggle in their false doctrine that was just refuted, as though this application that we practice routinely, right, is evidence of their erroneous doctrine. No.
Dude, that
They
is
don't.
such a good point, bro. I did not know that was a thing. Pragmatic fallacy.
Yes.
Dude, they do this all the time, bro.
All of the time.
Let me define it for the room. The pragmatic fallacy is an informal fallacy where an argument incorrectly concludes something is true because it has practical benefits or is useful for someone to believe. Think about
That's their
what
go-to, bro. Yeah.
Dude, all their responses to like say Newtonian gravity being disproven. They're like, but we use it for building bridges.
For computers, yeah.
Well, what's
They do the same
what? Hold on. What's the fallacy where you can't do any of the math or anything else, but yet just because you think you've got a gotcha, that you think you've proven it wrong, even though every scientist that deals with it shows that it's correct.
Yeah.
What's that fallacy?
Very true.
Dude, the people that actually deal with it, which I have dozens of hours talking to them, appeal to and pretend to speak on the behalf of, they all openly and readily acknowledge things such as Newtonian gravity is not true, can't be true, we know it's wrong. General relativity is not actually correct, it's just the best we've come up with up to date. All these people that you appeal to, when I talk to them, they openly say this. When I talk to a quantum physicist and I'm like, I say what I always say in here. No, like I agree the phenomena is super real. We have incredibly precise observations, detections, incredibly precise predictive models. You know what I'm saying? But, and that is maybe the most precise field of science ever. But the phenomena can be true, and we can also acknowledge that these mathematical models that we've come up with aren't actually true. It's just what we're using for our purposes of quantification, predictability, replication, etc. The models are just placeholders. They're just conceptions. They're just reified ideas that we use. And so we shouldn't be reifying them, but you guys do reify them. We should acknowledge them for what they are. Mathematical models. When I bring that point up,
I
they
agree.
all
I agree with
readily
that.
acknowledge that. So it's but
agree
when
with that.
when I'm talking to but then why when I'm talking to so many of the people on this other side, they act like we know that all these particles actually are real things. Like the gluon is a definitive real thing. It's like the electron is a real phenomena, but the charge carrying particle of mass conception we're taught in 7th grade isn't a real thing. I mean, it's not even the conception anymore. It's just like, it's an idea of like a cloud. It's just like, a wave function probability distribution. We don't even, you know what I'm saying? So this goes for the thing with Newtonian gravity. Dude, Gregory, I'm so glad that you just put a name on this. I didn't know this was a thing because you responded with, well, what do you call it when no one else has something, bro? That's a red herring, man, because you understand. It doesn't mean that your conclusion's untrue just because the way you defended it is fallacious, but it means that you haven't validly defended it, and there is no valid defense for it. When we point out like all these refutations of Newtonian gravity, for example, and then someone responds to, it works perfectly fine on the solar system scale. We use it to build bridges. Engineers use it all over the world today. That's a pragmatic fallacy.
No, I said we use it to put satellites in orbit around other planets, not build bridges.
Even if that were true, it would be a pragmatic fallacy.
Why?
Because even if the math is useful, just because the math is useful and you can use it to do something, this framework of Newtonian gravity, it works on selective scenarios. You can use it to do something practically. That doesn't actually mean it's true.
It don't mean it's not true.
No, what means it's not true is all the
But you're saying
falsifications
it's
of it.
absolutely not true.
No, we're saying your patent No.
Shut up, Gregory. I don't want to hear from you. I'm talking to Witsit.
You don't have the right to try and shove my voice out of the VC. We're
That's all you
correcting
do,
your
shove your
error.
voice in.
We're correcting your error.
You direct people
I'm
all the time,
replying to
don't
what
you?
you said.
direct people all the
I'm
time.
replying to what you said. Okay?
I was talking
No,
to
we're
Witsit.
not saying that. We're exposing the fallacy in your line of argument, which proves that your argument is fallacious, which proves you don't know the proposition you assert. That's the point.
You, everything's fallacious, isn't it?
No, the fallacy would be if we claim that it works and it didn't actually work. That would be a fallacy.
No, when
that's
you
not
say a
what the
fallacious
fallacy
argument,
is.
no, when you say a fallacious argument and we expose your fallacy, we've proven that you don't know your proposition. That's the whole point of that.
Yeah, let me read it for you again, Lifeline, okay? A pragmatic fallacy is an informal fallacy where an argument incorrectly concludes something is true because it has practical benefits or is useful for someone to believe. So the fact that it works in certain scenarios doesn't mean it's true. And by the way,
That's your conclusion. That's your conclusion.
No. It's a fact. Something can work and not be true. And actually, Newtonian gravity is a perfect example of that, because within your own paradigm, this is well acknowledged. It's like Newtonian gravity, it works in scenarios such as most of like this local conception of the solar system, or it works for things like engineering, which is really just accounting for weight and downward acceleration. You don't even have to use gravity at all for that. It's a joke. But like, yeah, it may work for those things, right? But it doesn't work in tons of other scenarios. But the fact that it works in certain selective scenarios doesn't mean it's true. And this is a perfect example. You're in your paradigm, it's acknowledged that Newtonian gravity isn't true. And this is why we always go in this circular thing. It's been years. I don't get how you guys don't get it.
I'm talking about general relativity, not Newtonian gravity.
Okay, but do you concede that the vast majority of people that argue on your side try to claim that both of them are true?
I would say yes, and I would say I admit that they're probably not 100% accurate, but I also say that they have to be pretty close or they wouldn't work.
That's the pragmatic fallacy.
This is where it gets so interesting, though, right?
But you can't throw it all out. I'm sorry, Witsit, to interrupt you. I just want to say you can't throw it all out and act like none of it works, like you are trying to do, because we don't have it 100% accurate, complete. It's like 98%.
I don't even think. First of all, I don't even think that most of us suggest that per se. Like, I don't suggest that. I don't suggest that with like quantum for sure. I don't think we should throw the models out. I think we need to acknowledge that they're just models, and we know they're not accurately describing what's going on in reality. Like they're not actually what's happening. We shouldn't throw them out. If we threw out all the quantum models, we'd be totally screwed. I guess you could say this about Newtonian gravity. I wouldn't, but I can yield ground there, because it's not what we want to be acknowledged is the acknowledgement that is not actually what's happening in reality. And in order to decide if that's true, we need to know what it is. So we're like, wait, okay, what is Newtonian gravity claiming is happening in reality? And what it claims is that gravity is instant, that there's instantaneous action at a distance, that gravity is an innate property of matter, that it is a force, that matter itself has an intrinsic property that generates a force called gravity that acts instantly at vast distances. And how that works, Newton didn't even attempt to explain. He was like, bro, I have no idea. He didn't even think that his theory was true. He was like, bro, if this is actually what's going on, then it has to just be God doing it live time. Like, that's the only way I can even imagine that something like that could be true, is that God is doing it.
Yes, Witsit, because Newton at that time didn't have the understanding of how it worked. It wasn't until Einstein came along and showed how it worked. To Newton, he did not have that idea of general relativity. So to him, mass attracting mass is what he thought. And to him, there had to be something in between those two pulling them together, and he didn't know what it was. When Einstein came along and gave us general relativity, then that explained how it works, and that's why now we understand it.
No, Newton
was wrong.
No, Newton used ether. That's what he said. That's what he discussed.
Yeah,
that's because he was living in a paradigm where he didn't have general relativity to understand it. If he would have had general relativity, he wouldn't have made that statement.
No, if Newtonian gravity was accurate,
this thing is happening where we're talking to Cole, we're saying the rebuttal, and he'll just repeat the proposition that we just critiqued. This
Gregory,
has to
quit
stop.
whining.
This has to stop. That's
let
not
Witsit respond with something substantive, because, I mean, Cole is sharing the viewpoint that is the mainstream scientific paradigm. So it is what it is.
But
I think
the issue
Gregory's
is
point is important. It's about the flow of conversation. It's like we don't ever get anywhere productive if they state their initial claim and then we engage with it in good faith and we specifically say why that claim isn't true, and then they just respond with the claim again. It's like, okay, wait. But what about how I just explained how the claim's not true?
No, hold on. How is it that you saying Newton said that he thought that it had to be God doing it, and I answered it by saying that he just didn't have the idea of general relativity. I give you the complete answer to what you said about Newton, and I explained why Newton was wrong and why he had that misunderstanding. How the F is that possibly just rambling and not answering anything and whatever the stupid shit that Gregory just said? You explain that to me.
I can.
Okay. Don't I want to say something?
Well, I was just saying that
you're
it's
still
pragmatic.
committing the pragmatic fallacy, and that's the problem, right? And the pragmatic
No,
fallacy,
that's it.
and the
That's what I was
pragmatic
saying.
fallacy comes right out of the epistemological paradigm, pragmatism. So you can learn all about pragmatism and the pros and cons and the philosophical kind of ideas behind that and how it doesn't represent reality. You can have mathematical constructs for things, but it doesn't necessarily represent reality because it works. And that's where the fallacy is coming from. So if you keep going in this like circular motion and keep going appealing back to the maths, but you're still committing this fallacy of pragmatism, where what you should be doing, you should be aiming towards the epistemological paradigm, the what's it called, the empiricism, and which is based on sense data. So that's what you should be looking towards. But your model and relative is based on the lack of sense data because you're 30 kilometers per second, which you don't read is the lack of sense data. So this is the problem that you have to go into while using the pragmatic fallacy in the first place.
This is what needs to stop. Let me say this real quick before you say that. This is what needs to stop. All this nonsense, like Gregory just said, I was doing and everything else. No, that's what you all are doing by constantly bringing up fallacies when you have nothing else to say. You want to say every damn thing that somebody, when somebody has a counter viewpoint, is a fallacy. That's the issue.
I was about to try to help you, and you said something ridiculous, bro. Like if
it's
someone's
always
argument
ridiculous
is
or a fallacy, isn't it?
dude,
Always.
it is not a good point to make that someone keeps bringing up fallacies, because if they're accurate about the use of a fallacy, then that means the person that they're responding to is incapable of presenting an argument that isn't fallacious. That isn't the other person's fault, and they have to point it out.
You're the fallacy king.
Look,
hang on. Let me just point this out. Just hang on just a second. It's a perfect example. This is a pragmatic fallacy. There is creation, therefore there is a creator. That's a pragmatic fallacy.
No, it's not. Oh my gosh. Okay. So anyway,
By
dude, just
definition.
to make the bigger point.
It's never a fallacy when it's their side.
Okay, what's the definition? Okay, explain how it's a pragmatic fallacy then. Define, you don't even know what it is. I mean, this is
technically it's a non sequitur left lane of the topic of God, but it is on the topic of the fallacy. So yeah, do you want to describe how it is then? How it is a pragmatic fallacy?
It's just reading the definition. It's a circular reasoning. I believe X is true, and believing in X results in some benefit. Therefore, X is true.
Okay, now you've switched it and brought it to claim it's a circular reasoning. So it's like, okay, let's just put a pause on that. It's not pragmatic. Pragmatic fallacy is basically claiming that your claim is true because it's practically useful or works in certain practical use cases. That is a pragmatic fallacy. It has nothing to do with the antecedent relationship of creation. But just real quick, I'm not to walk in here. I just want to make this point. Like, I think that Gregory's point is important in general. I think that with what Cole said is a little bit nuanced. It requires some like extrapolation to actually understand how where we would basically just be the same place we started. But I just want to kind of make this point to you, bro. Okay. My point is that people defend Newtonian gravity as if it's true. This is not me avoiding relativity. I am thoroughly convinced I can easily destroy it. I'm just trying to keep us on points, though. Newtonian gravity is always defended as if it's true. They always use the pragmatic fallacy, which even though is a thing, which is awesome that I now know that. Okay, because it isn't true just because we can use it some places, right? Because I could just come up with a replacement. I could come up with a etheric force and then use reverse engineer the kinematic relationship of Kepler's laws, which is what Newton did, and then just replace that with my own dynamic force and call it anything I want to, and then come up with any reason as to why it's happening. I could actually say God doing it. And then I could turn around and say, look, I can use this equation for anything, bro. We can use this equation for all of our building, and it works to explain the planets. So therefore, it's legit. It's true. That's the reason it's a fallacy, because that's a terrible parameter. Listen, bro, that's a terrible parameter for determining what is true. If that was the case, we could have 1,000 competing theories making contradictory claims, all simultaneously being true. This is the same reason like appeal to authority isn't valid, because authorities could disagree and make contradictory claims. So if you want to know if something's fallacious or not, just ask yourself, if I apply this standard, could it result in multiple contradictory claims allegedly being true? That's how you know if something's fallacious. You can always work it back and know that it's fallacious. Now, I'm only talking this long because I'm about to have to like kind of step away. I just want to say this bigger point to you, okay? The fact that Newton said it was just God doing it directly, directly is relevant. That's the point. Is he's saying like, bro, I can't even figure out how this could possibly happen. Okay, so if everyone now wants to update their rhetoric and stop claiming that Newtonian gravity is true, most people say that both Einsteinian and Newtonian gravity are true, which is ridiculous. If you guys want to stop claiming it's true and you want to say what it actually is, well, it's useful in certain use cases, even though we know it's not actually true. It's not what actually happens in reality. Then you're not going to get near as much kickback. We're going to be like, okay, cool. Thanks for conceding it isn't true. Now we can move on to relativity, right?
Every
So you guys don't do that.
Every scientist I've ever heard to speak on Newtonian gravity admits that general relativity is the way it works. Newtonian is just a useful tool that we use. All of them. That's all. Gregory, shut up.
Hold on.
Okay?
That's not even me talking. That's not even me talking.
Well, whoever it is, it sounds
John
like
is hot
whoever
miking.
it is.
John is hot miking. Go ahead, dude. I already moved him.
But
That was perfect. That was just perfect. Just proved my point.
Yeah, whatever. But every scientist I've ever heard in my life says that the general relativity is the truth, or is what they think is the closest to the truth that we have, and Newtonian is just a useful tool that allows us to do things locally. That's I've heard that so many times, like by every scientist that ever talks about it. And Witsit, you acting like that you can just disprove Newton so easy and everything else, and then you repeat that Newton said that it must be God and everything else, after I just said a while ago, if he had general relativity in front of him, he would not have made that statement. That's why he made it, because he didn't understand it. To him, in that damn time, it might as well have been God. But it's ridiculous when you can't even do the math yourself, yet you think you can come in here and you're like the king of Dunning-Kruger and think that you can just disprove hundreds of years of the smartest people on the planet doing this stuff. That's the epitome of a fallacy.
Dude, have you not been in the conversation?
Your cloud of clerics is not epistemologically superior.
For the past
They are. You have a group of people. Okay, this is your worldview. You have a group of people that you revere as being so sagacious, right? Equivalent to the Christians or the Muslims or the Jews or the Hindus, etc., etc.
Except for all the
So they
evidence.
have clerics. Okay, they have this group of people who they revere to be far smarter than them. No one is obligated to take your clerics, your alleged sages of your worldview for granted. We will scrutinize them. So you whining about us contradicting their edicts and their proclamations and their doctrines is just that, you whining. You have to say logically sound arguments to prove you know anything, including proving that you know that they know what they're talking about. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay.
I do know they know what they're talking about, because we put fucking robots on other planets. Just because you want to deny reality and showing how stupid you are doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
You literally just use the pragmatic fallacy again. You literally
shut
just
up with the
appeal to it.
fallacies. That's the
Okay, so watch
stupidest
this.
argument you can make.
Watch this.
You just did it though.
Look, watch this. We're going to see if he knows anything. So specifically concerning the subject that is general relativity. In fact, I'll let him pick. Are you in the mood to defend general relativity or special relativity? Cole.
What's your point?
Which one, so that we can prove that you know something?
Just pick one.
Okay, you leave it up to me. General relativity. Okay. Now, what is it? Let's define it.
What defines general relativity? Right off the top of my head, I can't give you the proper definition of general
Oh,
relativity. I
wow.
don't have it memorized.
Wow. So
All right.
on the very first step, within less than a minute and a
Just because
half, he
I
can't
can't
even
give you a proper
articulate,
definition
and now
doesn't
he
mean I
has
don't know
to
what it
clamor
is.
through me. Now he has to clamor through me. He just said he knows they're right. And then when I ask him the simple first naturally initial question, right? What is general relativity? He can't manage to even define what it is. So if you don't know what the thing is, you don't even know what the proposition is that's being referred to by the term, how could he possibly know it's true? He couldn't. That's an obvious concession to ignorance. It's
No,
over.
it's not. I know that they use it to accomplish things. That's how I know that it's correct.
It's another
It is.
pragmatic fallacy. You're literally describing it. Just
Okay, you
because
don't
it
even know what
works
it
doesn't make it
is.
true.
You
That's
don't even
literally
know.
what I'm saying.
All right.
You don't even know what it is that they're applying. You don't
But
know
you
what it
guys are trying
is,
to
as you just
say
admitted.
you guys are trying to say it's not true, even though it does work. Do you not
You don't even
realize
know,
that?
again, as you keep chanting at us, as you waste people's time, you don't even
No, Greg,
know
you
what
waste
it
people's time
is.
by thinking you're
Okay, now he's
intelligent.
going to keep clamoring for me. He doesn't know what it is.
He
So he
could say
couldn't
curvy.
possibly know
He could say
that he's a.
curvy space time.
Stop
He
talking
could
to
say
me.
curvy
Stop
space. He could say,
talking
"I'm
to
giving
me.
you a
Stop
definition.
talking to
Giving
me.
you a
Stop.
definition. Giving you a
Stop.
definition."
Stop.
Hold on,
Oh,
Gregory. I
don't
have
want
to
me to
mute you
give it.
for a second. You can't just be yelling stop. That's one thing we can't have. You either have to pull back or someone has to jump in, but you can't just yell stop over and over. It's chaotic. Now, that was a little bit much. I wanted to get in from before, but let's just maybe left lane, I think, was speaking.
Go ahead.
Yeah, real short. You could say bendy space time is general relativity, or you could say that mass tells space how to bend and space tells mass how to move. That's it in a nutshell.
But I
Do they
know
have like their own
if I didn't
language?
give an exact definition, I know the way Gregory is. If I didn't give an exact definition, then he would act like I didn't know what I was talking about. So just to be an asshole to him, that's why I said what I said. And I'm going to continue to be an asshole to him. Because he's an asshole to me.
Okay. So he just decided to say a non-argument as though him not defining what the thing is that he asserted and he knows to be true is somehow proving I'm at fault. Right? That's just silly. So it's a very simple and obvious what I've done. Okay. Like for some reason I was muted, even though I'm the one trying to return focus back to the subject and have a sequitur conversation. Right?
Yeah,
The
I
other one's
clearly
clamoring
said
for
why.
me.
I clearly said why. If you're going to bring me into this in the moderation, I will interject and say I clearly said why because you were shouting stop, stop, stop over and over. We can't have that. We have to figure out how to go one by one. So we just can't have that because it makes complete like audio chaos.
So when you hear them clearly clamoring for me while I'm trying to return to the subject, why don't you censure them?
It's like no one got censored. It's moderation, first of all. It's like a traffic jam. So something has to occur. I thought left lane was speaking, but yes, when there's multiple people, that's why we have to do a one-on-one. If you want to do a one-on-one with someone, because if you say a rebuttal to Cole, like if you and Cole go back 3 times, and if it's an open panel, it's not a one-on-one. If you and Cole go back 3 times, and then left lane's trying to get in, and you know what I mean? And then you really want to respond to Cole, it might make sense that you're going to push through because you're like, hey, I have to respond to Cole. But left lane thinks it's an open panel and he's stepping in. So that's why it's important. If it's going to be an open panel, we need to all realize that you're not going to get your exact point answered or be able to respond because somebody else might jump in. And it's impossible just to be muting, micromanage muting everybody and trying to judge who spoke first by this, blink of a second. So there has to be a flow. If you want to do a one-on-one or a 2v2 or a 2v1 or whatever, we have to define that. And then that way we can moderate for other people jumping in and you can make sure to get your point responded to. Because I think that's kind of what happened there.
You said you was wanting to say something,
Please pay
Gio, or
attention to
you
the
had
flow
a
of the
point.
dialogue. Please pay attention. All right. So what we did is I gave him a simple question to simply state what GR is. He refused to say what it was, evidently, given what he just last said, as though that somehow exposes a fault on my part. So him refusing to specify what it even is, which proves he doesn't know what it is, or they just refuse to prove they know what it is somehow an expose of my fault. That's what he just did.
Yeah, I explained why I did it. Gio, you said you had something you was going to say. I'm going to back out and let you continue. There was some point you said you was going to make a while ago.
Well, yeah, it's kind of past now, and wherever we're going to go from here, but it was actually just a point about in terms of like the way they use GR in terms of for like satellites. We were talking about the pragmatics, and I was just going to say from before that part of the claim that it's used in the satellites also includes that satellites are actually free falling around a sphere. So some folks might believe that and say, hey, we're practically using it for that purpose of a satellite free falling around a sphere, but they themselves have not verified that that actually is happening. And I know that the rebuttal is say, oh, we get signals from the sky. I know we get signals from the sky. I'm not saying that's not the case, but there could be a different communication system above us that is not objects free falling around a sphere. So to use that as proof that it's being practically used for that, I was just going to say from before, would bring in the whole question of to first validate whether it is even being used practically for that. So I was going to say that one part, and then the second part with the pragmatic fallacy thing. If something is working, like let's just take a different example of like even in computers, like there's certain ways in which like GR and SR are used in certain technology, or at least some of the calculations are claimed to be. Now, what I was going to say, if something does work that we can validate, there must be something true about it, you know? So that would be the thing to parse out. Like it could be a pragmatic fallacy. Like for example, if I made up Superman force, and I'm going to call gravity what we call gravity Superman force, but I plug something into it that does actually work, that doesn't really mean that Superman force is true. It just means that Superman force took something that was true and then implemented it into something and then relabeled it, rebranded it, which is kind of what's being discussed here when it comes to ether and GR and SR in terms of what's actually going on, you know, beneath it. So just because something works practically, first of all, does it or not, like I said with the satellites, and then if it does, if something is actually working, it's more, I think, the question of what part of it is true, that it is working in reality, but then does that mean the whole thing is true or all the associated parts of it are true to go along with it, would all have to be parsed out.
There's a significant nuance that's missing concerning the pragmatic fallacy. The reason I mention the pragmatic fallacy is because the logical form is as follows. I believe X is true. Plug in X for SR. Or just theory relativity, both GR and SR. Believing in X results in practical benefit Y. Therefore, X is true. Okay? So in other words, speaking from Cole's perspective, or speaking from the perspective of the scientists in general, the adherents of scientism, I believe relativity theory, doctrine, is true. Believing in relativity theory, doctrine, results in practical benefit Y, satellites, and all the rest. Therefore, relativity theory is true. That's the fallacy. Right? Just because they believe this doctrine and they apply actual applicable things while believing X, that is general relativity or special relativity, does not prove that doctrine is true. That's the pragmatic fallacy. So every time they make that argument and stubbornly repeat it after we expose the fallacy in that line of argument, that's all they're doing.
Yeah, Gio, do you agree that that is a pragmatic fallacy to basically be like, you know, you have a refutation for general relativity or Newtonian or classical Newtonian gravity, right? And then how it's in contradictory to general relativity, but people claim to, you know, to accept both. And then Cole just spits out like, well, what about the satellites that orbit around different planets? Like, do you understand? Like, that's what we're talking about. Like, just making that kind of assertion. That's the fallacy.
Trying to think how to answer that. Well, doesn't it depend though if satellites are actually going around planets?
No, because even if they use the equations of like Newtonian gravity to put actual satellites around planets, it wouldn't prove that the theory of Newtonian gravity is true, right? That's why I gave the example of, because how Newton actually did it was he looked at Kepler's laws, which is just relationship. It's like based on like the radii. So it's like the relative position of the planets and how they all move. They have a relationship. He just used that ratio, right? That's what Kepler did. Then Newton came, looked at the ratio, and just like reverse engineered it and plugged in a dynamic force, which is he called gravity. And then he wrote about it and was like, dude, okay, I'm just basically saying, okay, a force could be making the planets move like that. I have no idea what it is, how it could work. I can't even imagine how something like that could work. unless God was doing it, right? That's why I gave the example of I could just, if we use that standard, I could have just came in, done the same thing. I can go to Kepler's laws right now, reverse engineer it, call the magic ether force, call it whatever I want, and then be like, I don't know how it works. God could be doing it, but it's in all matter has it innately or whatever, you know. And so if there is a relationship, meaning like if you got close enough to a planet and the satellite can start moving around it, that wouldn't prove that what you're claiming is doing it is actually doing it, even if the math worked and you can use it.
Well, Witsit, that is what you do. You come
Cole,
in here and
you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Witsit, that is what you do. You come in here and you say that it's what is it? Something to do with electricity that causes everything to fall. I can't remember exactly how you said it. I've heard you say it a bunch of times though. It's your theory of things are pulled down because there's more something whatever you say about electricity that causes you think gravity instead of actual what we say gravity is. I can't say it word for word, but I know what it is in my head. I can't come up with.
Do you not know why that's? Do you not know why that's different?
But you're doing the same exact thing that you're complaining about and saying that is a fallacy. You do it all the time. You commit the same fallacy.
It's not the same thing at all.
It is.
What fallacy? What fallacy?
Yeah, what fallacy are you saying I'm committing, bro?
What'd you call it? The pragmatic fallacy?
Okay,
Plug it
I'm
in the
not.
form. Plug it in the form.
No, he's not gonna know what it is, guys. But Cole,
Exactly.
you've done this. You've done this before, not just with satellites orbiting around a planet, but when we talk about, quantum field theory, right? QFT or you basically be like, well, without quantum, then we wouldn't even be able to have communication through our cell phones.
We wouldn't.
That's
No, I don't say no. I
respond to
say
this?
that's how we store data in our cell phones.
Right.
Okay,
It's another
cool.
pragmatic fallacy. I'm just giving you
It's
more
not.
examples
All
of
right,
what you're
bro,
doing.
can I please? Okay, but he's saying that what I do with electrostatics is the same thing. I want to explain why it's
Electrostatics.
not.
That was the word I was trying to remember.
All right, brother, it's not the same at all. What I say about electrostatics is, look, okay, in science, we're going to have a dependent variable, a naturally occurring observable phenomenon, right? So the objects go up and or down, right? Okay, naturally occurring observable phenomenon. Now I'm going to try to figure out the cause of it. So I'm going to put forth a cause and effect relationship test. I'm going to say, like the presumed cause is like, let's just say the electric nature of the object and the and like its ambient environment. Okay, we say electrostatics. So then I'm going to test that presumed cause, my hypothesis, which is that my hypothesis is if you manipulate static electricity of the object, it will, or the object's environment, then it will make the object go up or down or change it or whatever. Now I'm going to vary that variable, right? I'm going to manipulate it. So then I pull out a Van de Graaff generator. I start manipulating electrostatics. And what happens is, sure enough, it causes the object to levitate or to go up or to go down faster. It'll even change the weight that's registered on a scale. So I've now verified that cause and effect relationship in real world testing. I've actually tested it and verified it. It's a real phenomenon. It's been proven, So that's my argument for why it's valid. I didn't say
this is where you fail though, because general relativity in the real world has been tested and shown that it's true.
Okay, can you give me a test or experiment that's actually going to validly hold to the structure of a scientific
the one that they used to verify general relativity. What was it? 1912 with the solar eclipse.
Okay, that was 1919. Arthur Eddington.
1919.
Okay, that wasn't an experiment at all. What they did was look at an eclipse and try to see a star from behind where the sun was. That's not where are they manipulating the cause of the things falling, or where are they independently?
Now, what fallacy is this?
What are you talking about? There's no fallacy. I'm saying it isn't a scientific experiment.
I'm sure there's a fallacy there somewhere. When you want to say that you're right because you did this, but they're not right because they didn't I don't know, manipulate a variable or something like that. Even
You're just
though,
ad homing.
even though they did the experiment, they showed the experiment to be true, but you act like that's somehow not correct. And I have heard you say yourself that electrostatics is absolutely correct in the way it works. I've heard you say that that's the way it
we
works.
just proved
So
it with
that
actual
is
science.
the same thing that you're acting like the scientists
It's
are
not the
doing.
same thing, bro, because I proved it with an actual experiment. It's actual science. And then in your situation, you're just making an observation. You're just looking in the sky and saying, oh, look, I saw something. Therefore, just take my word for it that what I'm claiming causes it is true. And the way that it's even worse than that in this scenario, though, because they're claiming, look, if we treat relativity as if it's true, then we'll get its mathematical prediction, and it predicts that you'll see the star from behind the sun. Oh, look, we did, therefore it's true. They used photographic plates, and out of like 35 of them, 33 of them or something didn't see it at all, didn't register it at all. And the two that are claimed to have registered it conveniently are nowhere to be found and couldn't have actually be validated. And Eddington himself then wrote about the test, which wasn't really a test, it was just an observational test, if you want to call it that. He wrote about the observation and said, this is a major problem for the theory of relativity because it didn't match the prediction.
We also see gravitational lensing.
Okay, so you see how you didn't engage with
just chanting. This has to stop.
You didn't engage with anything I said, bro. You understand how that's fundamentally different from the experiment with electrostatics?
Yes, I
But
give
you're not
him
engaging in a
another
conversation.
I give him another example of something that we've seen, something that has been verified, something that we know is all these things are how we know that it works. And there are probably at this point thousands of tests been done that verifies general relativity.
But he's just chanting. Now, for some reason, what I'm saying is so
Gregory,
that we don't get
shut the fuck
now,
up.
there he goes. I waited till he was done talking, so it's going to be consistent
Because
moderation.
you're not saying anything.
Now he's continued to strive to stifle my reply after I waited till he was done talking. Right? Let's pay attention. He is just chanting. I'm saying this for the sake of the conversation and the audience. How about we just stop listening to him chant over and over again, saying non-arguments to all these arguments?
Non-arguments, huh? Me giving different ways that we know it's true is non-arguments.
Okay, look, watch. We'll try it one more time.
Gregory, I don't know who
Watch.
lied to you and told you you was smart when
Listen,
you was a
now
kid,
strive
but
to
you
talk
need
to
to get
me
it out of your
when
head that you're
Hermes
intelligent.
propels,
You are not
right?
intelligent as you think you are.
Right? Just strive to talk through me when you can clearly hear when I said, how about this? He decided to interrupt me. So here we go again. Let's try this again. Your position is general relativity is true. What is general relativity?
General relativity is the curving of space-time.
Is that it? There's no other nuances to it?
That's what you're getting, because like I said a while ago, if I don't give you verbatim, word for word, the definition out of some book you have somewhere, that you'll act like I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's all you get. Get the fuck
You
over
just
it.
have to act like it, bro. You just don't know what you're talking
That's
about.
a fallacy within itself.
There's
Okay,
another
so
fallacy. Buzzword. I'm gonna start calling Sam buzzword every time I
okay.
hear that word.
All right. So he'll just petulantly give this watered down version. Okay, fine. That's his premise that he supposed in this debate. All right, let's go with it. What is space?
What is space?
Uh-huh.
Well, we consider space, I guess you could say, anything outside of our atmosphere that's not in another atmosphere on another planet. It would be the vacuum between bodies of mass in our universe.
Space is only outside the atmosphere.
No, space is in between every two molecules bouncing off each other. It's the same space. It's just here on Earth, molecules are a lot closer together.
So space is located where the molecules are?
In between them, yes, same thing.
Yeah, this is an example of ridiculousness. Just
Okay,
very,
now
very
listen to him
common
throw a tantrum and
understanding.
destroy the
Everybody
debate.
knows what space
So now listen to
is.
him throw
Why
a
are you
tantrum
asking
and
what
destroy the
space
debate.
is?
So now listen to him throw a
Because he
tantrum.
thinks he's intelligent.
No,
Okay.
dude, he's doing a line of questioning. God.
Grief. grown men throwing tantrums all the time. Again, so space is only between the molecules, and space is not where the molecules are. There's no space where the molecules are.
If they're taking up that space, I mean, you could say that there's
Oh,
somehow
okay.
space there with mass in it if you want
They
to.
occupy space.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then space is what? Because you just used the word to define the word, which is a circular definition fallacy. Try again.
I don't know, genius. You tell me since you're so smart.
Oh, you don't know. Okay, so you don't know what space
No,
even is.
you tell me since you're so smart.
Okay, you can clearly hear.
Because I can't stand this
Here we
motherfucker.
go. Here we go. I'm throwing a tantrum again. So you don't know, like you just explicitly admitted.
That's why I was trying to talk to you a while ago, Witsit.
Again, here it goes again. So you don't know what space is, like you just explicitly admitted in the hearing of everyone in your microphone. So you couldn't possibly know any predication about it, including the alleged GR doctrine. You just conceded ignorance, which explodes your position. You don't know. That's it.
No, I gave you an answer and you didn't like it. So then I told you, I said, well, then fine. I don't know. You give me one. Go ahead.
What's the significance of asking what space is? Everybody knows what space is. There's no significance to the question.
Okay, there is significance to the question. Yeah, well, just to briefly entertain that the petulant reply, there is significance to the question because, of course, if you are going to predicate about anything, about any noun whatsoever, right, then you have to know what it is. Like this is not debatable, right? So you complaining about the question, which challenges your worldview, doesn't prove that there's some sort of error being committed by me when I ask the question. You have to know what the fuck something is in order to know any other predication that you're going to ascribe to it. So if you don't know what the thing is, then of course you couldn't know anything about the thing.
And I told you what it is, and then you come back with a stupid ass question about is space in matter or whatever stupid ass question you came back with. You're the one being stupid here.
Okay, you didn't.
How do you not see it?
Okay, you didn't tell me what it is because you used the word to define the word. When I asked you what space is, you said it's the space between the molecules.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry. The distance.
You can clearly hear I wasn't done. You have to interrupt me every time I reply to you. When you said your answer, you committed the circular definition fallacy, where you repeat the word as a part of the definition of the word, which proves you don't know what it is.
Are you done? Okay, the way we've tested general relativity, precession of Mercury's orbit, bending of light near the sun, gravitational redshift, time dilation, detection of gravitational waves, binary pulsars, and the list goes on and on and on.
Which
AI
AI did you use?
ChatGPT, yeah. What LLM did you use,
I just
Cole?
Googled it. I didn't use AI, I just Googled it.
Gemini? That was a Gemini winner? That was a Gemini.
Yeah, Gemini, yep.
Actually, it's Bing. I didn't even Google it. It's on Microsoft here.
Yeah, so you just chanced again.
Just because I Googled it, because I don't have it off the top of my head, doesn't make it not
More
true.
clamoring for me. He doesn't know what space is, as he just explicitly admitted. We've heard him say, I don't know. How about you tell me? That's how he ended his position. That's a complete concession to his ignorance. So he doesn't even know what space is, so he couldn't know any predication about space, including the supposed predication that is the doctrine that is GR. It's
No,
over.
Gregory.
That's the end.
That's not what happened. I give you a definition, but you didn't like it, so you started asking ignorant questions. So then I said, well, fine, I must not know, or I said, fine, I don't know. What is it? You tell me. That's not saying I don't know. That's saying you seem to think you're so smart. Then you enlighten us on what it is.
No, you said curvy space time. So he asked you what is space, and then other sophist left lane comes in. What's the point of asking what is space? I don't know, because it's pertinent to what he answered with. You guys are
How
ridiculous.
do you guys not listen to your own selves and realize what what you're saying? How do you not?
So here we go with the circle again. Then I asked you again, your answer to my question is what is space? You said the space between the molecules. That's a circular definition fallacy.
Exactly.
And this right here is why I can't stand you. You get so hung up on one word that you bore the fuck out of the room for an hour over one word. And you've not just done it with me. You've done it with like several people in here.
Everyone disagrees
You're
with you.
boring.
It's ridiculous.
Everyone disagrees with you, Cole.
No, they don't, because we had a whole conversation yesterday about 8 people agreeing with me on the same fucking thing.
Who cares? Who cares about agreeing with somebody? It's about holding each other to their word. When you say things, it should have meaning behind it. Otherwise, you're just speaking to speak. Okay.
It does.
So when he points out that you use space in your definition, that is a fallacy.
Buzzword.
You're using it.
He's
No,
so
it's not a
triggered.
buzzword.
He's so triggered by getting held accountable in
It's crazy, dude. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it is. He's so triggered by that because he lacks basic reason and basic logic.
I don't lack basic reasoning.
Does everyone here know what space is, right?
Yeah, everyone knows what space is. Cole, from it's 6 minutes past the hour.
Thank
But 6
God,
minutes
Red
past the
Cloud
next
is here
hour.
to save him.
Hold on, what he just said is that we can move away from the meta stuff. But I just responded to it because people were starting to say, "Oh, fallacies." We're just, like Red Cloud was like fallacy counter, and someone else was saying
way too
buzzword.
many.
Please don't interrupt me. So people are trying to. People, it seems like generally on the globe position tend to want to disparage the use of fallacies, which is strange because then does that mean you want to use them? Is that what you're voting for? Like, hey, I want to use the fallacies and not be called out for them? Because let me say my last part. Okay, then if you want to rebut that, but I'm just saying anyone who's disparaging it, you would have to say you're against them, which against calling them out, which I would then ask why. Secondly, if there is a fallacy being used, what B said is very true, because to get to truth, you have to not have fallacies. For example, if someone says something and someone just throws an ad hom, an insult, or they throw an appeal to authority, that's not helping to get to truth. We want to get to the truth, not what just some authority says, or not what the majority says, or not what an insult says. We want to actually get to the truth. That's why they're important. It's like...
cool. So let's agree with you that we're wrong about space. So go ahead and correct us.
Well, when I first started speaking, I didn't even get through my first sentence, and Gregory spoke up and said, "Are we really going to put up with this and start?" Hold on, I'm going to answer why I've been a smartass, just so everybody will know. But he immediately spoke up and started acting like I should be silenced. Are we really going to listen to me? And blah blah blah. That instantly set me against him. If you don't want me to be an asshole, don't be a prick.
Cole, can I ask you something?
That we don't know what space is. Biasicles, please inform us. Oh, enlightened one.
Cole, can I ask you something? Did you know that a fallacy is an error in reasoning?
More meta. That's insane. Do you guys not care?
No, this is what Gio was just bringing up.
Guys, we need to organize this. Electric, if you want to get into an engagement, let us know. You can either do one-on-one or we can bring it in. But I know you're trying to go back to the topic. I had mentioned the fallacy thing. We need to figure out what we're doing. Gregory is not, I think he's maybe finished with the Cole engagement. So go ahead, Galleon, if you want to at least finish on that. And we have to figure out what we're going to do.
Clearly,
I just want to address the thing you said, because if someone points out that I have an error in my reasoning, I usually feel like humbled by it. It's like, okay, where did I go wrong? How can I adjust this argument? So what I want to ask Cole, because I agree with you, Gio, I think it's a good thing. What I want to ask Cole is, Cole, did you know that a fallacy is an error in reasoning?
Yes, and I also know that when you call out fallacies constantly, that's usually just you either not having a rebuttal or you don't like what I'm saying. So you got to try to call it out. Just like a while ago when I was given the answer, when I gave the answer on why Newton thought that it had to be God, and y'all said that was a fallacy. How is me reasoning that because somebody don't know all the information that they think it's one thing when it's really not? How is that a flaw in my reasoning? And yet it got called a fallacy. So I think you guys don't know what fallacies are. You just like to use the buzzword. That's what
assuming to know what Newton thought or knew or didn't know. Like that's an assumption on your part. Like
I'd like to just.
Okay, so why are you trying to hijack? Okay, so the answer is yes. If the
No, it's
argument's
hijacking.
fallacious, it's not valid. Okay, so
But
then you're correct.
that's-
Stop interrupting me. Show some impulse control, dude.
Oh.
Okay, so if an argument is fallacious, it's invalid. So if someone says, hey, that's such and such fallacy, then if you think it isn't fallacious, then you can defend it. The person then explains why it is a fallacy. Okay, we do not just say it's a fallacy and not explain it. That's a lie. And the reason that it's important is because if your argument's fallacious, it's invalid, bro.
What is the argument?
And just on this topic. Yeah, the thing is, on this topic, Red Cloud, there's either two things that are happening. One thing, from the next step from what he just said, and you can respond right after me. From the one step, somebody could be using the word fallacy as a tactic. Maybe it's possible. Somebody could just shout fallacy just to do what you're doing, to distract from the point or to derail. It's possible somebody in the history of the world has done that, or maybe many have done it many times. That's possible. Or there's a heck of a lot of fallacies flying around the room and they're being called out. One of the two. You're trying to claim they're all the latter, like, oh, everyone's just using them as a way to distract from the. Okay, if that happens, we can call that out. We can look at it. The thing is, if anyone usually calls a fallacy, if they have the chance to claim what it is, they're going to say what it is. I don't really hear people just randomly saying fallacy without being willing to say what it is. Sometimes the combo is moving fast. The mic might not come back to them or something to that effect. Because on the other hand, if there's a lot of fallacies going on, then that's why it keeps coming up.
Or there's a number 3 to that. You guys think you know that it's a fallacy when it's really not, and you make up reasons that you think makes it a fallacy when it's really not.
Then you should be able to defend it. So let's just use Red Cloud's example. He jumped in. Let's use his example so we can all have a learning moment. He said the guy brought up satellites, and we just said it was a fallacy so that we could avoid it. Okay, that's not what happened. We were talking about the validity of Newtonian gravity and whether or not it was true. And when the refutation was put forth, his response was, well, good thing that we use it to put satellites around planets. Or if that were true, we wouldn't be able to use it to put satellites around planets. So he claimed that Newtonian gravity was true because it's used to put satellites around planets.
No, I said general relativity.
No, we were talking about Newtonian gravity when you said that.
I know, but I clearly stated that I was talking about general relativity.
Yes. Later you said that, but that's not the point. The point is, dude, because it doesn't matter whether it's GR or Newtonian gravity. The point is that we then pointed out that's a pragmatic fallacy, meaning something isn't true simply because it's useful or can be used in certain cases. We then actually defined it. I read the definition verbatim. We did not just scream out fallacy to avoid it. The point is obviously true, right? I'm going to define it again. The pragmatic fallacy is an informal fallacy where an argument incorrectly concludes something is true because it has practical benefits or is useful for someone to believe.
Right.
So when I pointed, can I respond?
Let me respond first. Hold on.
And I can get a minute and a half without being interrupted.
So when I said that Witsit, when you say it's electrostatics and you said you do testing that shows that it's true, and I said that is the exact epitome of that fallacy that you're talking about, you said no, that wasn't a fallacy.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
Exactly.
The result of any experiment to justify it.
I'm trying to let the guy respond. I'm trying to actually let the guy, unlike you guys, I try to show decorum. I said something to him. I'm trying to let him respond. But then you guys use the tactic of trying to make other points afterwards and then never get to address. So can we let the guy respond, please?
I said what I was going to say.
I didn't know who you were talking about.
I'm talking to you, man. You're the one that claimed that we just randomly, dishonestly threw out fallacy to dismiss satellites.
Yes.
Okay, I just explained.
You also do experiments. Notice how I can't get 2 words out.
Okay, I'm trying to get back to you. I just cleared the floor for you. I'm saying I explained what the fallacy is. Now I'm giving it back to you to tell me why I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, he left. Looks like he left.
Is it time to answer the actual question that matters? Then?
That is par for the course for him, though. He'll say something like that, and then when held to it, he'll do that. So.
And then Cole just accused.
I was about to say we're going to find out who's being dishonest right now. That was what I was going to say, and then but he left.
This always happens. We back up our fallacies. I mean, at least I know I try to, and most people do. We say we don't want there to be fallacies. We would rather have productive conversations. The issue is that all of these arguments people have been trained to repeat in defense of like the mainstream spinning, flying through space globe model, they're all fallacious.
That's why they don't teach. That's why they don't teach like fallacies in public school system, because then you would apply them to their rhetoric and then it would all fall apart. So Cole, you also just accused Witsit is electrostatic argument, you accused him of being fallacious. Can you name the fallacy and then explain how it applied?
I'll do Tony's response. No.
Well,
Okay, yeah, I mean,
his whole thing
The
is
thing is
that
too, like, well, real quick, the thing is too, it would be ideal, like, okay, let's say I'm debating, since Galtrex, you were just speaking, let's say you and I are debating, and if I do something and you say, hey, it's a fallacy, and then you say your point why it's a fallacy, and then maybe if I rebut it or defend it, so I mean, if there's a good back and forth on it, fair enough, but even if we don't agree, that's where like having like a jury comes in, kind of thing, where you now have a group of individuals that can actually, try to decipher it further. So the thing is, if you're called out for a fallacy, then you defend it, you may not agree that it was a fallacy. That may be, you may still be on that side. You know what I mean? The other person, but it's like if the other person's right that it is a fallacy, and then you don't have a valid rebuttal, but you have a rebuttal that you think is one, but it's not a valid one. I'm not saying you, Cole, I'm just saying anyone. Then it ends up being like that's why they have juries in courts and things. There's a judge and jury. That's why that's the case instead of just two people. To get to it. So that's where it does get more complex.
Dude, it's actually so far from what actually happens because when someone accuses me of a fallacy, every single time, I'll even stop in the middle, even if it was an interruption, I'll drop everything right then and say, okay, tell me how it's blank and blank fallacy and give them a chance to try to explain it. And then I rebut and explain why it isn't that fallacy, right? That's how debate works because we're trying to prove our arguments are valid so that we can substantiate the conclusions.
What's the argument for your position about space? What is it?
About space? What?
Yeah, you forgot what the topic was about because it's
That's a
fallacy
good.
nonsense.
That's a good way to progress forward. Okay.
Honestly, Witsit, this isn't even for you. It's for the people that tried to attack Cole after he gave that list that are supposedly things that space does. I'm just wondering, what is the counter? How do you describe space? I'm just wondering.
You're asking me, I think space is simply a conceptual abstraction. It's an idea of nothingness or emptiness. It's just a privation. It's the same reason we use the number 0, the same reason we use the word empty, right? It's nothing in and of itself. It's like a shadow. That's the absence of light. Like shadows aren't anything. They're just the absence of something else. Space is the absence of anything, like nothing or emptiness.
Excellent.
So it's
Thank
just a
you.
concept of nothing.
So I find
argue
that
that's not
right
quite
in the
correct.
line with the paradigm that Cole is believing in, right? Like,
No.
Cole, would you describe it the same way?
Yes.
Okay, then you're contradicting GR.
Yeah, because
Gregory,
if space is merely a concept, then we have an issue if you then try to treat it like it's a real physical thing. Either it's just a concept of nothingness, it doesn't actually exist, or it's a real physical thing that has properties and bends and warps.
Well, there's a nuance missing, right? That I critique that dichotomy to be a false dichotomy. If you go with the proposition, it is a conception of nothing. Well, either you're talking about the concept of nothingness, or you're talking about nothingness itself. But either way, that would entail absurd implications about what space is, because space is not contingent upon minds. Right?
So
There's
then what is
space
the
between
distance
you and I.
between mass?
There's space between you and I, regardless of me acknowledging that or not, and regardless of me being
Yeah, we
aware of
call
that or
that
not.
space.
Hang on, just let me finish this uninterrupted. Right? Since we're going to talk about this ontological topic, right? That's categorically a concern of ontology. Just read the Wikipedia article. And so, does it concern space, right? Is it a concrete entity? No, it's not. It doesn't have any material properties at all. It doesn't have any properties like any other material whatsoever. You can't go anywhere at all and find me the matter, the substance that is space. It's not that type of thing. It's not an abstract entity either. But it's not contingent upon minds, or it doesn't subsist minds either. Right? So what do you have left? So there's a category in ontology that most people are oblivious to. There's states of affairs. Right? There's space between you and I, like I just said, whether I'm aware of that or not, whether anyone's aware of that or not. There's space between you and I, whether I acknowledge that or not, also. Right? So it's a state of affairs, which consists of the spatial categories, length, width, breadth, depth, right? Which are categories of states of affairs, spatial relationships. Okay, so
You're bringing aligning with the paradigm that you're supposedly trying to refute.
No, I'm not. The paradigm that I'm refuting reifies space to be a concrete entity, which I just explicitly refuted.
Yeah, I don't know what you would say space is. I don't know. It could be like Witsit says. It could be the ether, the aether, however you say it. It's a thing because it's in reality. But I don't know what makes it up. But that still doesn't mean that the way mass behaves in that reality is untrue.
Space isn't the ether either. Two categorically different things. Right? The ether is the spatial plenum. It's the spatial plenum. It's the substrate that occupies all volume. Volume synonymous with space. Okay.
And now my turn? Like, can we finally do this?
Wait up. Tony's going to respond.
Oh, I have to wait. Oh my God, great.
No, I'll let
Tony
go.
literally came
Sure,
in
go on,
after me. So what the heck?
All right,
go ahead.
All right, Tony.
Oh,
Tony's
Tony's yielding the floor.
forfeited.
Awesome. Now it's my turn, right? So I'll try to make sense of what the claim actually is. All right, Witsit, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I just really want to understand this position. Do you think that gravitational lensing is a real observed phenomenon?
No.
That we don't have examples of time dilation and lensing?
I would say that the phenomena of, like a called lensing, like that phenomena is real, but it's not gravitational, right? So, but yeah.
Okay, so therefore, what's causing that effect is not the absence of things. It's not space like they claim. Like if we're going to give context to what they're saying is causing the lensing in their paradigm, it's the absence of mass, which would be whatever, space-time, nothingness, right? That's just the context. So to say that that's not space, how are you going to test your claim? Because I'm calling that affirming the consequent, which is exactly what Cole tried to. He couldn't name the fallacy, and I did for him.
What? No. Okay. I'm not making a claim about it. Like, I'm not making a claim about what lensing observed in the sky. That's the difference. What he was trying to say, which was ridiculous, he was trying to say I was using the same fallacy we had just discussed, which was a pragmatic fallacy. When I brought up electrostat, he brought this up, actually, not me, saying that electrostatics for the reason things go up and down. I said, no, it's totally different. I say, look, I can do an experiment that directly manipulates the cause of the effect and establishes that relationship. How is that the same as it? That's not a pragmatic anything. So he just randomly brought that in off the wall. And then he ended up bringing up the 1919 observation of Arthur Eddington, which was about, the star from behind the eclipse. And I had to inform him about that because Eddington actually wrote and said, we have a problem. We didn't really observe what we're supposed to. And this is a major problem for relativity. So ironically, they didn't even make the observation they wanted.
So then when they say that there's time dilation happening to atomic clocks at different altitudes, you're saying that that is not that's not even happening? Like that's not observed?
There's a phenomena where the amount of little oscillations within the clock do change, and it seems to have some relationship with altitude or movement, but it's actually somewhat inconsistent. Like when they first did the Haffel-Keating test, if you actually look at the data charts, it changed what they're calling time, which is actually just quote unquote cesium atoms. We'll just say cesium, right? It changed both east and west. So it didn't even match any type of idea of time dilation. People just claim it did, but we actually went and read the paper and looked at the data. The data doesn't work at all. So it does seem like cesium clocks there is an effect on them at higher altitudes, but there's all kinds of reasons for this. If we look at the way it actually works, they use like a magnetic resonance frequency to add like a resonator to actually like tune in what they're calling atoms, right? To make sure that they're vibrating at the right. So there could be all kinds of names. It could be a relationship with the magnetic field. It could be, depending on the environment up there in general, right? Like they're just throwing time in there as if it's a real thing and stretching it out basically.
So then this is the final thing about it. Sorry, Tony, let me just finish this and then I'm done. There's a final thing about it. So then that, what we're calling space, it is being occupied by something. Like we're saying it's magnetism or it's having effect on physical things. So technically it would be a concrete entity in a sense.
Well,
no.
I'd like to address that. I'd like to address the more...
Tony, stop. Dude, we don't care, dude. So no, it's not because space is just an idea, bro. But it's not acting on anything in that scenario, right? When you say something that's in space, like for colloquial purposes, I engage with that. No, it's magnetism in that scenario, right? And then I have my idea of what magnetism is, right? Which is it's a modality, it's a form of the ether itself, like the primary substance, the background, it's just a form of that. We won't have to get into all that, but no, it's just their space is never doing anything. So
I
I
appreciate you
completely
answering my
agree.
question.
It's not.
Unlike
Yeah,
these
yeah,
other
yeah.
people that don't like making claims, but thank you.
So, what Witsit said about Hafele-Keating is false. The Hafele-Keating results are consistent with the calculations of the combined effects of special and general relativity. His claim that they are not is simply false. Yes, they calculate different east and west velocities that's because they combine it with the rotation of Earth. And the fact that they get different time dilation results is a demonstration of the reality of Earth rotation. Furthermore, he's ignoring the Tokyo Tower experiments and the laboratory experiments that confirm and measure gravitational time dilation in laboratory settings. He's referenced one example. Returning back to Gregory, Gregory said and then he says that it is a true dichotomy. He's just contradicting himself.
This is what Tom tried to do right there. He tried to do. He tried to act like he was debunking me and then blocked me out of it. And it's actually just kind of BS because Electric was trying to talk to me for a minute after Tony couldn't respond to the fact that Gregory brought up a Stanford definition and dunked on him, and then had to bring up the basic concept that something doesn't exist within itself, and that's ridiculously stupid. Okay, but now I have to address the nonsense you just said. It actually showed an increase and decrease in both cardinal directions, which is not predicted by relativity or time dilation. You're incorrect. You said I'm ignoring the tower test. No one's ignoring anything. I threw out one simple example to engage with his question in good faith. No one's ignoring anything. And we have the actual data charts. We've pulled them and we've showed them. And it showed an increase and decrease in both directions. Okay, and you're just going to say, nuh-uh, and I don't care. So you can go back and respond to Gregory now when you tried to escape it, because every time your point gets refuted, you try to avoid acknowledging it. So if you can maybe stillman what Gregory's response to you was, and then actually respond to it if you're trying to jump back in the conversation.
Okay, so Gregory cited a Stanford definition, which started by saying that the boundary between concrete and abstract is not firmly defined, and advising that it is and suggesting that it is inadvisable to try and sandwich concepts into one or the other when it may not be appropriate to make such a distinction. And then Gregory went on to whether something is concrete or not is a true dichotomy, which his own source directly refuted, and said that space existing within itself implies that there is something outside it within which it must exist, which is simply irrational. There's no claim in that. There's no claim in. There's nothing in I think, therefore I am that requires there to be anything external. That is not philosophically or syllogistically sound.
So you butchered
that was not a
argument,
still
right?
man at all, but we'll let Gregory go. Yep.
Yeah, you butchered my argument, right? You can hear him stumbling over his words when he said something exists
He didn't
outside it.
stumble
Right?
at all. Thank you. He didn't do any of that.
Don't interrupt Gregory,
Okay,
please.
Gregory, we
Thank you.
don't need stuff like that, bro. We don't need just the sideline commentary to be antagonistic, bro. Please.
Try again. So he stumbled over his words by his butchering of my position, failure or steel man. When we heard him say, because something exists outside of it, no. What I said was your proposition, space exists in itself, implies the contradiction that it exists outside of itself, so that it exists in itself. The contradiction being, P, it exists in itself, not P, it exists outside itself simultaneously. So that's the implicit contradiction of your proposition, which clearly proves deductively that it's logically impossible for it, space, or anything else to exist in itself. That's what I said to you. Now, I know you're not going to track with that.
How is the
So I'd be very surprised.
implication?
I'd be very surprised. You actually did track with the deductive argument I just told you. Okay.
Okay.
By the way, the rule of inference.
Because-
Hang on. By the way, the rule of inference is modus tollens. Okay. So then after that, you then butchered right the quotation that I gave from Several Encyclopedia of Philosophy, right? As though somehow the quote that I gave is defeating my point, and you didn't actually articulate any specific thing in the article that refutes me, because I acknowledged in the article, as you can see here, these nuances that they mentioned, because they're writing from their worldview, which is inevitable. Everyone must write from the worldview; it's inevitable. There are people who are not able to articulate their arguments or their reasons for why they assert this or that given entity to be this or that type of given entity, concrete or abstract, right? Which is why I mentioned to you earlier the deductive reasoning I said.
Any logician ever published an article asserting that there must exist something outside the universe?
Why are you even adding some new thing to it, right? You just totally changed the conversation. Since you just said every single logician agrees with you, okay, please post all of these logicians that agree that space can exist within space. Go ahead.
They have not published any arguments arguing that the universe existing within itself is there is nothing in the peer-reviewed literature that says that this is logically incoherent.
We're not talking about the universe. We're talking about space.
Actually, we were.
Why would everybody
I
agree with
mentioned
you?
the universe previously, and Gregory said that's the same argument. So Gregory concedes that whether or not the universe exists within itself is analogous to whether or not space exists within itself.
Okay, so you cannot post any logician saying that space can exist within itself, even though you claim that all of them agree with it.
None of them have published any results disputing the claim that space exists within itself. Allow me to refine my claim. There is no peer-reviewed literature saying that the claim that the universe exists within itself is logically incoherent, which is what Gregory is trying to argue.
Can you please propose anyone that you're appealing to, that you're claiming to speak on behalf of all of them? So cosmologist, astrophysicist, astronomist, logician, you name it. Can you please post some people that have said that the universe exists within itself? Go ahead.
Okay, let me just do a search.
Yeah,
so let me actually do
my
research, proving that I don't know what I'm talking about right now.
Good luck, because no one would ever say that. And notice how whenever he made this is what's so funny. He's making the positive assertion that all logicians in the world agree with them, right? And he knows he just completely made that up. You're never going to find someone claim that space can exist within itself, right? That's a ridiculous position. And then whenever pressed to say, okay, please support this really bold claim that literally all of them in the whole world agree with you, he's like, well, no one said otherwise. What? So that's an appeal to ignorance.
The universe contains all that exists. According to the standard definition in cosmology, the universe is all of space, time, matter, and energy. Because it encompasses everything to be contained by anything external. So the claim that there must be something external to the universe is not correct, right?
Because they say otherwise.
That claim now.
Because they say
so you do reject.
We're engaging with the logical argument put forth, right? So logically, that means that by the way, it's fallacious anyway for you just to default to be like, oh, let me see if I can Google something that says something similar to what I believe. That's goofy. But engage with the point. And this is, can I help expedite us to the end here? What PhDTony is saying, right? When he says, you just went to your backyard and he said, you can't just apply the same basic logic, like laws of logic and principles of logic to the universe. Okay. So he's saying that his position is illogical. And this is the really funny part, right? So whenever we say something cannot exist within itself, that's goofy. That doesn't make any sense, because obviously for something to be containing it, then it has to exist outside of it so that it can then contain it, right? That it can then be put in it, right? And so when we make that point, he says, nuh-uh, not when it comes to space / the universe, which he is treating as synonyms. So that is called a, drum roll please, special pleading fallacy. Okay, you're claiming the exception to a universal principle, meaning in all scenarios, that we can conceive of, that we can observe, that we can empirically test and validate, that we can even logically comprehend. In all of known reality, we know that something cannot exist within itself, right? And that and if you're going to put something in something else, then obviously that something else exists without whatever you're putting in, or outside of whatever you're putting inside of it, right? You're claiming the exception to that. That's called special pleading, bro. And this is what we're supposed to always do, is just yield to you these baseless claims of like the one exception in all of reality. And you even went as far as to say solipsism, right? You invoke solipsism as your argument, which means the implication of you even bringing that up is that space is only concrete within the perspective of solipsism. That was your initial argument.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't. So
Come back here.
to provide an example, I provided a logical example of a universe, a solipsistic universe that contained itself. Right? I provided a logical example. That does not mean that that is my view. I provided a logical and easily articulable counterexample to the claim. That is all I need to exist in order to falsify the counterclaim. There only needs to be one logical possibility that contradicts your assertion in order to. Don't talk over me.
That's not what happened.
Yes, it is interruptions.
Tony,
he was supposed to be supporting.
Man, what he just that.
Okay, and again, nothing. There are solipsists.
That people retreat to solipsism
no one
when
can
they
know
know that they're
anything
wrong.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah, no one can know
Alright,
anything.
So
you don't know that you're breathing right now, Cole. You don't know how to breathe. You don't know that you're breathing right now.
So are we progressing to another topic? That's what it sounds like.
I mean, I was just trying to make that point in general. We don't have to talk about it. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like the lowest level of conversation ever. Solipsism is just stupid.
Now, at best, when we talk about the subject, at best is when someone's challenging someone else's worldview. It's one thing for someone to assert that to be true. Another thing for someone to scrutinize someone else's worldview to see if it does or does not collapse into solipsism, which is nothing more than subjectivism and skepticism, absolute skepticism.
Yeah,
at best.
Of course. Yeah, Tony, we don't need you to tell us that you didn't say it was true. You've said that 7 times. We know. You just used it as some weird little tactic to try to explain that yours was possible when you're trying to support the assertion that space is concrete. And that was the only example you were able to provide. Basically, what that means is the only way you were able to support this idea that space is concrete is to invoke something you claim you don't even believe in, and you think you're shaky at best and is intrinsically flawed. I mean, you can know nothing, which would contradict the very initial premise that you were trying to claim to know.
On what basis do you conclude that that's the only example?
No one said that's the only example. No one said it was the only example. That was the only example you showed, is what he said.
I brought up the example of the universe. I brought up the example of cosmological models. I brought up the example of cosmological understanding. I brought up all of these things, but it comes down to you and he are happy to introduce an axiom that I am not happy to introduce. And whether or not that makes my position invalid,
then why are you jumping back in?
You're going to have to
Why are you jumping back in then?
Yourself on other people. Pardon?
Okay, so then why are you jumping back in then?
Because actually, I feel like as you coming on and shitting on the one idea that I came up one of the counterexamples I came up with is unfair, and I get to respond to it.
I didn't mention you at all. I didn't mention you at all.
Move the conversation along to a different topic and don't provide your editorial feedback.
I didn't mention. You don't get to dictate what I talk about. I was forced to listen to your inability to engage with the simplicity that something can't exist within itself for 30 minutes. If I didn't want to give my opinion about what I just suffered through, I'm allowed to do that. You don't get to tell me what I cannot. I didn't even mention your name till you just started
And
interjecting
I
through the
get to
middle of us.
respond to it
My
every
guy,
time
my
you do,
guy,
Witsit.
my guy, my
Every
guy,
time you do
my
it,
guy. You're
I get to
interrupting
respond.
me. You weren't. I didn't even say your name. I wasn't talking
I
about
don't
you.
care.
Oh, you
Shit,
don't
okay.
care. All right. Can we mute
Like
Tony? Can we just get
unbearable.
I
Yeah,
don't want to talk with him anymore.
like
Can I
we've
can I
all
can I
heard.
change the topic into something that
Yes,
was
please.
mentioned, but
Yeah,
it's actually
can we
completely off
just?
topic?
Yeah, I just think
Abductive
that like.
versus deductive reasoning. So Tony said deductive reasoning is shaky at best. But from
He
what
said
I'm
that.
seeing, there's a lot of
No, I
mathematics,
didn't.
logic, and situations
No, I
where
didn't
you're
say that,
using
Taylor.
deductive reasoning.
No, I didn't, Taylor. What I said was
Oh, that is what you said.
Gregory's
it.
claim to be using deductive reasoning is shaky at best. I did not say deductive reasoning is shaky at best. I said Gregory's claim to be using it is shaky at best.
We can run back and run the tape.
That doesn't
Okay.
matter. Like,
All right, look, let's make this clear. Let's make this clear. All right, so the last thing I
Not
said to
directed
refute
deductive
him was the argument that you already heard me say at least a dozen times. His rebuttal is, I don't believe you, appeal to incredulity fallacy. His other rebuttal is, the experts, the smart people don't believe you. The appeal to authority fallacy and appeal to incredulity fallacy wrapped up in one, and not specifying any given authority, so it's an ambiguous authority fallacy. And that's all he had. Now, unless he has something else to say besides that,
I don't want to
he
even
doesn't have
engage with him, Greg.
No.
I know.
Okay, that was
yeah.
Gregory's recap. Okay.
We gotta just be
so-
careful. Like, I
Yeah,
want to involve
anything
everybody
else,
else, anybody else in
yeah.
the room. There's a lot of people in here. I don't want to just keep hearing Tony.
Especially
No
not where
offense,
it's just
Tony.
like I literally, I'm not exaggerating this, bro. I'm like, dude, my homie's playing this music real loud, so I just turned the volume all the way down. I did tons of stuff. I come back, I step outside, I turn the volume up, and I literally heard the exact same thing. So it's just like, all right, at that point, we gotta. I'm sure I've done it before too, but just like it's painful, dude. It's painful. So anyway, I mean, like I guess like the broader question here is just like it's crazy. This is we're all told this story about where we live and the universe and all these ideas, right? And when we're growing up, we're just told them as if they're fact, and so we're taught them as something to memorize that is known to be true, right? And only when you maybe get to college and go into these specific fields are you then kind of let in on the secret that, oh, by the way, Massachusett mass isn't actually the full story, bro. And no, we don't actually know these things. They're just our best theories that we kind of have at the moment. And then they kind of let you in on, some of the stuff is shaky. They still present it as if we do know it, though, at the same time. Right. So it's like this weird little like contradiction. And then anyway, the point is, we just kind of like accept it as like it's another thing on a list that we learn. Like we learn about reality, right? Like we learn to tie our shoes. We learn how to do math. We learn about physics and chemistry or whatever, right? And then we just throw this in the list there as if it's just a truth that we learn and need to like memorize or whatever. So most people have never even taken it and actually thought through it. What are the necessary implications? How does this make sense? Does this even make sense to me? Is this like logically possible? Like, and then when people actually do that in rooms like this, when us crazy flat earthers that are just wasting our time brought this conversation back to the world, put it back on the table and said, wait up, let's challenge all of these like supposed truth claims, all these beliefs about what's going on. Only then did a larger percentage of the population actually even try to think about what they believe to be true, what they hold to be true. And then when you see people actually trying to do it out loud, live time in these rooms, that's when you start seeing absurdity go on. Like, just reach for the stars, bro. And it just turns into like, well, I mean, I think that technically this could happen, right? I don't even actually believe that. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that is what's happening. But I mean, in theory, maybe it possibly could, right? And so that should be pretty interesting to people that's what you have to end up going in that direction where you just like run around and not know anything at all to kind of even try to stand behind mainstream cosmology. That should be pretty telling, right?
Speculation ad infinitum, essentially.
Yeah, and it's not just wasting time. Tony told me in this space here today I'm wasting my life with this topic. Even though I've learned much more in this topic about physics than I did in undergrad physics 1 and 2. I've learned a lot, met some great people, and I would say that I'm not wasting my life in this conversation. I really enjoy it.
Okay.
Yo, what does that say about you, Tony? If you're saying she's wasting her life for being in here, then what are you doing with people who are wasting their life in here, according to you? That's weird.
I am trying to present data that they did not previously have, by which they can make better life decisions. Thank you for your interruption.
You're the only one wasting your time, Tony.
Wasting their life.
You don't need. Yeah, you're concern trolling. You're just.
I disagree.
Why don't you go to the other servers? Why don't you go to the other servers where, little boys think they can be girls, or go to other servers where they talk about politics, or other places where you think that they're wasting their time, whatever that is for you, right? Well, go to the server where people think pigs can fly. Because if you think that flat Earth is that absurd, why don't you go just obsessively watch all their content, memorize everything that they say, and then try to hold them to task and berate them and belittle them and let them know that they're insignificant? Why don't you not do it to all these other people? Since you're just a vigilante that's going through the world trying to save people from being misled and save people from wasting their time, then why don't you do it to all these other groups that exist?
Tony, because we appreciate I have a finite amount of time, and I am going to assign it where I think it is most productive.
Tony, we appreciate you and thank you for your expert opinion on these difficult to understand topics.
Yeah, I don't think it wastes
Save us from the Freemasons. Save us from the Freemasons.
He got totally chopped up, but whatever. Expert
what
opinion.
Subject have we progressed to?
And by the way, guys, if you have a PhD, it doesn't make you an expert in everything that you decide to then tout as being part of academia. Therefore, he's a seismologist. So if you're not a seismologist?
No.
What was your PhD thesis?
That's what he told me it was on.
What was your dissertation?
Do I get to answer that question?
He thinks he's an expert on health too.
Yeah, what was your PhD thesis?
It was on developing high resolution techniques.
Let's just make room for him to answer.
So he cooked his food today, is what you're saying?
Okay, try again without everyone talking. What are you?
The one time
I'm a geophysicist.
Okay.
A geophysicist.
Okay,
All right.
Sorry, bro. Okay,
studying seismology.
Yeah, because
instruments to better detect it.
Yeah, your PhD was specific to seismology. So my point is,
can I make a point on that? By the way,
okay.
You guys,
just to go with what you're saying, but you can go ahead.
Okay, so
you really hone in on one specific topic when getting your PhD. You hone in extremely hard on one specific topic to get your PhD and thesis and do your dissertation on. You might take a few other classes that go over general fields and geophysics or whatever. But yeah, you're going to be honed in on one particular thing. Go ahead. I know that from experience. Just saying.
Right. So my point is, yeah, that's true. Right. So the fact someone has a PhD, okay, cool. They're probably significantly more informed about that specific subject they decided for their dissertation or whatever than the general public. Sure. If someone has those 3 letters before their name, it doesn't even mean that they have reached the right conclusion about that very specific topic. Okay? That's kind of the whole point of the dissertation. Secondly, if you got those little 3 letters before your name, it definitely doesn't automatically transform you like you turned Super Saiyan the next morning and you're now an expert in all fields science or whatever, fill in the blank. So it's not an expert opinion. It's not an expert opinion, right? If someone with a PhD in another field decides to pretend to be the authority in an infinite amount of fields. It's ridiculous.
Yes. Something Tony did, he was trying to tell me vitamin A is toxic, and I actually cited a PhD physiologist refuting it, and then he just ignored it. And then other people tried to jump in with him. They all got dunked on. So, Tony, you're not an expert on anything. Keep your mouth shut. Thank you.
Yeah, like I've said so many times before, not one of you all could argue with me about coal mining because not one of you all has ever done it. But I guarantee you all.
Did you hear what I just said?
I don't care.
What I just said?
I don't care.
I cited
one of you all can come in here.
I cited a PhD physiologist.
I said I don't
about
care.
Vitamin A toxicity.
I don't
Tony
care.
thought he was an expert on.
You made the statement that he's not an expert on anything. So let me say what I want to say. Like I said, I could argue with you all about coal mining all day long, and not one of you all would know anything about it other than a few things you may have read because you have no experience doing it. Even though
Agreed.
Tony may not have experience in particular fields, just the fact that he is a scientist and he's went through all the schooling makes him a pretty good expert in a lot of things. So to claim he's not an expert in nothing is just
Cole's got a
wrong.
good point.
That's so
Cole's got a
goofy.
good
Like
point.
the fact that someone gets a PhD, they now get like a bumped up authoritative position with whatever topic in science they want to talk about. That is so laughable, bro. And hey, newsflash to the room. Okay, if say what were we just talking about? Cosmology. Let's get like an expert in cosmology, expert in physics, expert in astronomy, astrology, quantum physics, you name it. Let's get an expert from each of those fields. Okay, they don't just become correct because they have a PhD or they're an expert in that field. That doesn't mean that they've reached the correct conclusion. And there's a very easy way to understand why that is or how that is. I can go grab 2 PhD astronomers and they can completely disagree on an insanely long list of things. They could actually disagree on almost everything. That's why appealing to authority is stupid. It makes no sense whatsoever. Okay. But I mean, for example, if we're talking to him about geophysics or seismology, I think the room would readily acknowledge that he knows more about that. And anytime I've heard that topic brought up, people acknowledge that he's got an expertise in that field, that he knows more about that field. Doesn't translate to him getting to come in here pretentiously talking down to everyone or lecturing everyone or whatever he says must be true. So, you know,
Well,
I think
even
it's
tonight,
all I was
PhD
saying-
John said all physicists agree the Earth does not move. Nothing moves. And then PhD Tony comes in and says all physicists agree the Earth is moving. So, I mean, they can't both be right. Let's say they are.
Yeah, that's true. He
Science is
did
always
totally say that.
changing.
He totally said that.
Yeah, I don't agree with doing that. Even though I'm getting like an education, I will hear out anybody's point. I'm not gonna say, "Oh yeah, everybody I'm gonna like disagree with the actual point being made, not be like, "Oh, you don't have an education. All these people, disagree with you." I'll just appeal to what has been demonstrated because I think that's the best way to do it instead of talking down on people. Like with the Origin of Life, I did some presentations and made some points on it, and I was told by that I'm not able to talk about it because I'm not doing research in Origin of Life, even though the Origin of Life researchers have the same exact credentials as I do and that I'm studying, which is just cell biology. There's no specific field in Origin of Life biology. It's not its like own topic. You just get a normal biology degree. But so even if you do have credentials, I don't think it's going to help being told that. Just saying.
It's just
Taylor, I would think I would say,
people
Taylor,
are
I
appealing
would say
to
that
his
When you listen to them and when they're trying to defend their position, they think they're authoritative persons that they appeal to. Such a strong appeal and so strongly indicative of whatever position they're trying to argue for. They think, and they really want to have something equivalent, and the rest of them are ignorant of this when I reference this, but they want to have something equivalent to what the Romanist Christians have. So the Romanist Christians, Roman Catholics have, they have the magisterium. There's this group of men that are the learned scholar experts who are ordained and sacralized to disseminate the wisdom, the knowledge, the facts down to everyone else. They want to have that in their worldview, but they just don't. Which is why I've said they have a phantom scientist magisterium. It's a phantom, it's not real. It's distinct to their worldview of scientism and scientists. And they want to have this magisterium of these authoritative groups of persons. A phantom scientist magisterium.
Phantom scientist magisterium.
Taylor, I would say that
it's
whatever
not
that
even
means.
that because Tony will actually deny another PhD who's an expert on a specific topic just because he's been arguing the opposite point. Like he doesn't actually respect it. He'll ignore
right there,
whatever. Yeah,
right
you're right.
there on
No,
your
you're
point.
right, Blob. I agree,
Yeah.
and I think no one should treat anyone like the other or exclude someone from a conversation based on credentials. That's just dehumanizing. It should be about the argument.
I want to say, let me say this real quick. I want to say to Taylor that once you finish your studies, Taylor, I would say that you're an expert in that field. I would say that to you. I would say that you understand it much better than I would because you've went to school, you've studied it, you have a much better understanding in it. That's all I meant by saying when somebody said Tony is not an expert in anything. I was just refuting that you can't say he's not an expert in anything if he's went through that much schooling.
So many fields of biology. I'm an expert in all of biology either.
You guys,
There's
can
so
I make
many
one?
subjects. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to make one point. But Cole, do you see the problem with outsourcing your autonomy, your autonomous thinking, right? Your ability to think and reason to someone else that's considered a so-called expert, right? That like takes the responsibility and accountability for your own beliefs and puts it on someone else.
I don't see it at all because I do it at my work where I've ever worked in my life. We have to do that. We have to refer to experts to keep us safe. We have to refer to people who have training like geologists to keep us from fucking dying. I mean, you refer to people who have training because that's why they have that training and the study they have. That's the point.
Dude, no one's denying that. Obviously, when you get on an airplane, you're appealing to the authority and the expertise of the person flying the plane. No one's denying that. But when you're in a debate and you say, I don't know why you're wrong, but I could invoke a bunch of authority, a bunch of consensus of PhDs, which when he does it, it's not even true, by the way. When you do that in a debate, it's a different thing. It's not the same as I'm on an airplane, I trust this pilot with my life. It's I'm pretending as if everybody agrees with me to make you look bad. It's a tactic and it's a lie.
In some sort of way or fashion.
So somebody made the claim that I disagree with PhDs who disagree with me. Can they cite an example for that?
I literally brought an example. I did. I cited a PhD physiologist and talking about vitamin A toxicity. Yeah.
Right.
You just
I want to reinforce Bob's point real quick.
Go ahead.
I want to reinforce one of his earlier points because Bob made a very good observation. Categorically, like what you said earlier about what Cole said, or what Tony said, he would be a schismatic. There's the orthodox, there's the heterodox, and there's the heretic and the schismatic. Right. So not only would he be a heretic, he would be a schismatic because he, among the other clerics, the other experts, is creating schism, division in between them by contradicting the majority opinion. Now they don't want to use these terms, right? Because then it concedes that they're in the same category as everyone else, that they have a worldview with the culture and all the rest. They want to exempt themselves from these categories, but they're in these categories.
Yeah.